from the worlds of the Genesis of Androzani Advent Calendar. The December Dump.
So, Callum, how do you wake up Sansa Stark?
I guess you attempt to rape her, I don't know. That's really dark.
Jesus. No, you softly turn her.
Okay, I don't think I get that one.
You softly turn her, because that's her name.
Oh, fucking hell.
I mean, I suppose it's the same thing.
I mean, that was the whole thing. She had PTSD about being raped, or potentially raped.
Anyway, spoilers. Hello and welcome to the Game of Thrones Season 2 recap and rankings. We do these every season where at the very end we talk about all the characters and we talk about all the different categories that you lot can vote in. And, oh god. And we also rank all the episodes. And it's a great bit of fun, but I think the best thing about it is it allows us to go through the whole season again and just to look at all in retrospect and get a full perspective on everything.
Such good fun.
Yes. And patreon.com/Genesis of Androzani. If you go there, you could probably have gotten early access to this video and watched it 24 hours early. For the full-length reactions that we do for the episodes, you can also go to Patreon for those. And yeah, it's pretty cool. Twitter.com/Androzani is where you can socialise with us, banter, and do all of that stuff. Yes, that is all the plugs. I'm very tired, but I'm going to persevere. I have got lots of stuff to eat beside me to help us, or help me out at least, with this video, but it should be okay. Right, you go. Oh, good. What is your initial overview of Game of Thrones Season 2?
It was a good follow-up. It was a good follow-up to Season 1. I thought this season, in terms of production, was a very big improvement. Because even though Season 1 looked really good, this, in terms of visually, looked incredible. This was such a highly produced season of television, from the camera work to the colour grading to also CGI was used quite a bit as well, and everything looked fantastic. The story, I think it's a natural progression from Season 1. I think this season did have a couple flaws in terms of really retaining focus in some aspects of some stories. I think the biggest one we could probably say is the Daenerys story. For her story this season it's just not as focused as it really should be, or didn't get enough development as it should. But overall, this is a very, very good season. A very good season with a good amount of consistent episodes. No bad episode. It's a really good follow-up to Season 1, I think, in terms of my initial thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my thoughts on this season over the course of the years, it's been very strange. Because when I first watched this season, I was at the stage where I wasn't really paying as much attention to the show as I should have. And weirdly, obviously there's going to be exceptions where we'll get to the rankings where there's exceptions to what I'm about to say. But I remember when I was first going through this season, in fact, I would say the first couple of times I went through it, I tended to favour the latter episodes more. Whereas this time around, I actually got a lot more enjoyment out of the first half, which is interesting, because that's a big change.
Yeah. I see what you mean from that. I think seeing this for the first time, I think looking back at all the episodes, the second half is more exciting, it's more engaging, but the first half is very good in terms of establishing where everybody is at.
Well,
post Season 1.
Well, the first half is very rewatchable, and it's
Yeah.
also I think it's the half that, in terms of its pure just writing standard, is the one that's superior. There's a couple of exceptions to that rule, but overall I would say those first 5 episodes, aside from, like, I would say one scene in Garden of Bones, is very consistent, and I would say just as good as, the consistency we got in season 1. Whereas the second half, whilst it's more eventful and more exciting to watch, there's some inconsistencies in there. But then when I first watched it, I wasn't really paying attention to those inconsistencies, so it was just, to me, it was just a more fun ride at that time. Don't know, it's hard to say, really.
Pretty much understand what you're saying. I think in terms of the first half is quite rewatchable, because I think a lot of the characters are very entertaining in every scene, and I like seeing the continuation from the first season and seeing how things have shifted.
Mm-hmm.
And I would definitely agree that I think the second half is way more action-packed and it's way more engaging in terms of like everything changing around the world. Like,
there's another factor to this as well, in terms of what's changed, and I think it's because on this most recent rewatch that we've done, I noticed that the first half tends to feature the storylines that I favour more, whereas the second half, like, we'll obviously get into the characters, but I noticed that this time around that there's some stuff in the first half that doesn't go past the halfway point, or at least it does, but it gets cut for a few episodes, some of it, and then the focus shifts on the other half. And I think the parts that they focus on in the first half on rewatch, I found slightly more interesting than the parts that they focused on in the second half, if that makes sense. So it's not just the quality, but it's also just so happens to be what they chose to focus on at the time. Bar, obviously, there are exceptions to that, because there's still some absolutely brilliant stuff in the second half as well. And there are exceptions to my rule, but I just found generally that was something that I noticed, that in the second half there was obviously still stuff that I really liked, but there was less of it.
Yeah. I understand that point.
Yeah, but it's still very strong across the board. And when I say that there are parts that I like more than others, it's not to say that there's anything that I think in the season is like genuinely bad, because I don't think it is. It's just that there's some of it that I don't think is quite as strong as the rest. And I think you mentioned the Daenerys storyline as one of them, and that's true.
Oh yeah, her story is, like, in terms of comparison to everything else, it's severely underdeveloped.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I would say, like, that's one of the biggest criticisms of this season, is that aspect of the season is extremely unfocused and nothing of real interest comes of it. Because while I think at the time when going through it, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm into this. It's nice. I think the location is pretty cool. I think there's a lot of interesting characters around them. But in the grand scheme of things, looking back on it as a whole package, it's not that interesting really, and doesn't really feel like it just feels like it's not. It feels so separate, and I get that Daenerys is not in Westeros. She's on, like, across the sea. So but it doesn't feel like it's leading to anything. This feels like a stopgap for Daenerys and her story. This feels like a pit stop.
Yeah, but the difference is as we highlighted in the reviews, it doesn't feel as natural of a stopgap because they tried to add in this dramatic story to it, which doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Because in the books there is no dramatic, my dragons are taken. It was just it was more of a character reflection.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll get more into that when we get to the specifics. But yeah, that is definitely something that lets the season down slightly, is that storyline being a bit mediocre.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, I would say it still had some strengths in some parts, but overall, it was a bit like, what? It's a bit weird.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's this season is the first signs of the cracks in the showrunners.
Yeah, if obviously, of course, we both know what happens in the final season. We know the problems it has. So if you are looking back on this and you're fully aware of what these writers do and their abilities, I say in quotations, it's very much you can see the actual cracks that you can sort of see as you go through the show.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, let's dig into this season with the characters, which is going to take a while because there's a lot. And I think I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think there might be even more than last time.
Oh, I'm sure there are.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's begin with Tyrion Lannister.
He was great. I love his story of him trying to save King's Landing from Joffrey, because what they do this season is with Joffrey, he's very much a very much selfish king and doesn't care about the people. He wants to fill his fantasy of being king, and Tyrion is the one that's trying to fix his shit. But I like the aspect of his story that he is seen by the public within King's Landing as like part of the problem. He goes on the whole thing of like sends Cersei's daughter off to save her. He is hiding Shay throughout the entire season, which is a very dangerous thing. Obviously with Bronn, they discover like the wildfire, which then aids them in the battle against Stannis. I think Tyrion in this season, while I think I prefer him how he was in season 1, not that I'm saying that he's changed, but I think I just preferred his sort of story in season 1. In season 2, it's so satisfying to watch him be in control despite his disabilities.
I think probably his best scenes come in the first half. The first one being,
I would agree.
The first one's being like the scene where he banishes Jenna Slint to the wall. That's one of them. You've got the scene where he interrogates Littlefinger, Varys, and Pycelle to find out which one is dealing with Cersei.
Yeah.
Then
you've even got the first scene of the season with him arriving at King's Landing and instantly dealing with Joffrey's shit, but dealing it in the best way.
Yeah, and then also,
so satisfying to watch.
One of my favourite little storylines in this season for Tyrion is this one with Lancel Lannister. Like, those scenes were so good.
Mm-hmm.
Like the one where
I can remember that scene.
Like the one where he basically corners him and talks about how he's been sleeping with Cersei. That was a great scene.
That was.
And then obviously, you know, he sends Marcella off to Dawn, and this upsets Cersei greatly. And I like how they start to build up sort of Tyrion feeling sympathy for Cersei, and there's like a slight bit of there's a bit of a connection with them, but then there's also a hatred at the same time. It's very complex.
Yeah.
But I think the part in this season that everyone remembers for Tyrion is his war speech at the Battle of Blackwater, because he is one of the reasons that King's Landing won against Stannis Baratheon.
Yes. I think this season, in contrast to season 1, how he was knocked out in a battle, with this, then him taking command and actually leading an attack is a nice progression for him to sort of be seen by the soldiers and I guess like the public of King's Landing that he's not a coward like Joffrey is, which is a nice symmetry between those two.
Yeah, but the fact that he organised the wildfire, he did this, all of this commanding in the war when the king had given up, that he did all of this, and yet at the very end his father got to take all the credit.
Yeah.
just a massive kick in the balls for him.
It is.
But yeah, I think Tyrion is fantastic, and he's just such a brilliant character with a great progression, and I just love him. Every scene he's in is very good.
I agree.
And yeah, like you said, a lot of the season also revolves around his romance with Shay and how he's trying to protect her.
Yeah, I feel like, I think going into this season with their storyline, I felt it might have been one of the weaker parts of the season, but it was actually one of the stronger elements.
Yeah.
Because I think the scenes between them were they do, not only the actors but the writing for them does a very good job at actually making you buy their relationship, because so easily could it seen, because Shay last season was a whore. It could have gone, like, it wasn't that convincing, and I'm glad that they actually did manage to make it convincing, and actually you could buy into their relationship. And it's like stuff in like the episode Blackwater where Shay is like taking care of Sansa, and it feels like it's well done because of the build-up of her character, what we actually know about her and her character. It's all that's really satisfying to watch.
Yes, but there is actually kind of a bit of a dark shadow to that, though, because I think when Tyrion sees Shay, he sees Tysha.
I think it's, yeah.
He sees that the whore that he married when he was 16.
Yeah, because they're pretty much very similar in terms of how Tyrion feels so easily like swept off his feet with like two whores. It's like I like the way that they did that in the last season, and now have done a story within this season where through our eyes it looks like they are falling in love, but it's, yeah, like the point you mentioned there, it's very similar to how he was with another whore. It's very interesting.
Yeah, and it's almost like you can tell, like, Tyrion, even despite what Shay says to him, despite what she does for him, he almost like can't believe that she's still there genuinely.
Yeah.
But then I think in the final scene of, in the final episode, I mean, it sort of confirms to him that, the fact that she still stays around, the fact that she doesn't care about the money.
Yeah. I definitely enjoyed their
Yep.
Relationship this season.
Yeah, and one of the sort of themes of the story throughout was something that Varys said about every other man in Westeros that's not me having a weakness, and Tyrion's story with Shay very much fits into that. And there's many other storylines here that also fit into that as well, but Tyrion and Shay's definitely fits into that because Shay is his weakness. And I really like that scene where Cersei thinks that she's found his whore. She finds Ros, and then he rushes back to his chambers and finds Shay. I did really like that. Yeah, I just thought Tyrion was very strong and got a lot of character development this season.
I agree. I thought his character was very strong this season.
Yeah. All right, shall we move on to the next one?
Yes.
We have Cersei Lannister.
Cersei Lannister, it is like, in season 1 she is like quite a sympathetic character, but I think this season she is way more resentful and hateful and like bitter in this season. But I think it makes sense because not only has she been drinking a lot more, but everything that happens to her, like her daughter being sent away, it makes sense why she gets to that point. And I think the actress does a fantastic job at making her, like, she's like such an interesting character. Like the scenes with her and Sansa and Blackwater are like really intriguing because like she seems like she's not a very, like, she doesn't bullshit like anything, especially like with her relationship with Sansa, which is such a creep. such a weird relationship that they have.
Yeah.
Scenes together. I really thought Cersei was very interesting this season.
Yeah, I really think that she sort of became an alcoholic. Very much like her late husband. And it was interesting that the fact that she started losing everything around her, the fact that Jaime's been captured. And then you've got, her son is on the throne, but he doesn't respect her either. And then, Marcella is shipped off to Dorne. And, there's a battle at Blackwater that's going to take place. And, Tommen could die from this. And the fact that, there's that scene where she almost pours essence of nightshade into his mouth to mercy kill him so that he doesn't get butchered. It was very stressful for her.
Yes.
Yeah. But
she's had a very stressful time.
One scene with Cersei that was very interesting though was in the first episode with Littlefinger, where Littlefinger tried to use his words to say that knowledge is power, and then she turned it around and said that power is power. I also thought that was quite interesting, because I feel like that kind of bit her in the arse the whole time after that point. Because then it was right after that scene that her son, she slapped her son for talking about how Robert would, sleep with other women. And then, his son's like, that's punishable by death, you'll never do it again.
Yeah.
And it's almost like she started to realise that the power was actually going to take her what she loved away. Like her daughter, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like that her character is becoming way more, like I say, with her hatefulness and bitterness. It's like, it's because of all this shit that is happening to her.
Yes.
The fact that she's losing power and losing her loved ones.
Absolutely. Yeah, but I thought she was very strong. I thought Lena Headey pulled it off really well. Especially any scenes where she was meant to be drunk, she was very good.
Oh yeah, that's some of the best drunk acting I've seen.
Yeah. Very strong. It wasn't over the top like some people are. Because, some people when they're drunk, they tend to go down the whole, like, Jack Sparrow route, It's like, where's the rum? That sort of thing. Whereas Cersei's drunk was very different to that. We also had the king himself, her son, Joffrey Baratheon, who, it doesn't feel like it, but he had a war to protect his throne against 4 other kings. But when you really think about it, it wasn't him that was fighting it, though. It was the men around him. It was the people around him.
Yeah, because he's a coward.
Yeah.
He's very much a coward king who only thinks about himself because he wants to feel his, like, fantasy of being king and he can do whatever he wants. But he's in a situation where he has to fight, like, multiple wars. But doesn't actually fight himself because he is very much a coward.
But at the same time, despite the fact that he's so arrogant and horrible, when you think about it, it makes sense why he's scared. Because he's just a child.
Yeah. But it's like he thinks he's so high and mighty. He thinks he is one of the best kings to ever live, despite him being a child. Yet can't back that up.
Yeah.
Especially all the, like, horrible things he does this season, like abuse 2 paid whores.
Yeah.
Who Tyrion gives to her to try and, like, calm him down, but it just goes in the opposite direction. It's like he's so, like Cersei is in some aspects, he's really fucked up in the head.
Yeah.
He thinks what he's doing is just, like, justified.
Well, but the thing is,
he's abusing 2 people.
The thing is, though, part of the reason why he's such a horrible person is because he has been brought up to be. It's his destiny to be king. That's how he's been raised. Spoilt by his mother, and then obviously his father was the king. Well, not his real father, but who he thought he was his father. It's very much his destiny to be king, which would explain why he's so different to his younger siblings, because he developed a very strong arrogance because of that, which caused him to become a very horrible person. Because, we talked in season 1 about how him being arrogant caused some issues on the ground level, but now that he's actually king, it's causing massive destruction for people's lives. There's all sorts of things he does, and he's very much a cowardly king, Joffrey. And he wasn't fit for a war at all. And it just, again, continuing what George was setting up in the first book about monarchy and the flaws of a monarchy, this very much in plain sight shows the flaws of a monarchy. I thought Jack Gleeson, really interestingly, his performance evolved because he, in the first season, he was very much a boy, whereas this time he's starting to feel a bit more like a man, which I found really interesting.
Yeah. I don't think his acting was
like when you
stellar.
When you think about the scene with Arya, Sansa and the Butcher's Boy in episode 2, it's very much him being a boy with power and with a big sword, and he's very he's got a very short temper. He's very trying to be the cool kid. But then you compare that to the scene where the scene at the start of season 2 where he talks down to his mother, or you think of the scene at the very end of the season where he accepts Marjorie as his new betrothed wife. He feels a lot older than he did then, I feel. But yeah, I thought Joffrey was, as always, he's such a great cog in the wheel, I feel, for this story. He's such a hateable character, but it's not a flat character either. It's not a pantomime villain. It's very much a real person that has been coated with destiny and has been spoiled to the point where he becomes like a radical dictator, but a cowardly one at the same time. And he has, I think George R. R. Martin has said before, he based him on King Edward II, who was very much the same. A young king, full of arrogance, put into power, who did horrible things, and just wanted to be king and wanted to have that power. I thought overall the writing around Joffrey was very consistent, very strong throughout.
I agree.
Mm-hmm. We also had Sansa Stark.
Yeah, she very much is in, with her character, she very much feels like she's in hell. She is in the worst place possible that she could be in. Especially after the death of her father. It feels like she's in torture every day.
Mm-hmm.
That scene of her, being... when she thinks she's going to finally leave King's Landing, when Joffrey gives her up for Marjorie, tosses her away, she's so relieved. Because every day since, really realising who Joffrey really is, she's just constantly miserable. She's getting attacks.
Yeah.
Every couple days. Her story is very miserable.
Yeah. But
to say the least.
Having said that, though, despite all of that, there's people around her that are looking after her. Because, and not in sort of they're not all I'm gonna be a white knight. They're all quite complex characters in their own right. Because, for example, Shay, obviously at first they got off to a bit of a rocky start because they were both coming off some very heated moments with other characters. But over the course of the season, Shay starts to protect her. Even going as so far as to say in the Battle of Blackwater that she would kill for her, which is quite interesting. Then you've also got the Hound, who started to protect her from the last episode of the previous season. The Hound, interestingly, she's constantly thanking him, and so is Tyrion, for looking after her. The scene where she was about to get raped by those people from Flea Bottom, and then the Hound saved her, and then the Hound, just sort of denying it, saying, "I'm no hero."
Yeah.
That was interesting. Then you've also got, weirdly, the next two, you've got Cersei, who is being horrible to her, but for some reason, they still have a connection. It's one of the most interesting character-to-character relationships, I think, Cersei and Sansa. It's so bizarre. It's very bizarre. But somehow it completely works. The fact that Cersei is her prison guard. You know, the one that's controlling her, the one that's abusing her, but somehow she's still giving her like these life lessons as well. Like, you know, how to be a woman. She's saying, you know, I was arranged to marry Robert, and it had its horrible moments, and she's trying to forewarn Sansa of what might happen if she marries Joffrey. It's interesting. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
And then the other side of that is Littlefinger, who, on one hand, he is trying to protect her from harm by giving her advice, but his motivation for doing so is quite creepy.
Yeah.
So yeah, Sansa is surrounded by some very interesting characters, I think.
Yeah, she very much feels like she's learning. She's very much feels like that she's just getting the full dose of what reality is. Because I think with last season, she very much felt like she had all these fantasies and dreams about what she thought her life was going to be or what she wanted it to be. But in reality, it's the worst thing she could possibly imagine is being disrespectful and treated like dirt and in danger every couple of days, and realizing that life is horrible in this world, especially as like a young princess.
Yes.
In people's eyes.
One thing I really liked about her evolution, though, is the fact that she's gone from being an actual naive child to now pretending to be naive to get under the skin of Joffrey.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was
and to
really
sort of
cool.
Avoid any trouble as well.
Yeah, I like the fact we saw in Blackwater, she found a way to get under Joffrey's skin without actually him noticing, because she was pretending to be naive and he believed it.
Yeah.
So she's starting to become more tactical.
Yeah, she's understanding how to survive.
Yeah.
It's like how Sansa is learning how to survive within captivity, like in like dirt, not dirt graves, like dirt jail and stuff like that. Sansa's trying to survive in like King's Landing with all these kings and queens and all that kind of stuff, like how to just get by. It's very interesting how they did that.
And I think it's interesting how Cersei can recognize that Joffrey is a horrible child, but obviously she's never gonna, let go of him because it's her child.
Exactly. Like it's like she fully acknowledges that how much of a bastard he is, but he's still her son. So she'll do anything to protect her.
And because the way that Joffrey is speaking to her reminds her of Robert Baratheon. And it's very possible that Joffrey developed that attitude from him, despite the fact that they're not even related, but because he was nurtured that way. Yeah, it's very interesting, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think I'm wondering how Sansa's story is going to go now, because now she's no longer going to marry Joffrey, but is now still stuck in King's Landing.
She's still a prisoner, but she's a much less valuable one now.
Exactly. She's going to not be seen as important. She's not going to be like... I imagine she's not going to be cared for as much.
Yep.
Like she'll... Because she'll, like, for example, she could be given, like Tyrion was, like a really shitty room. She won't be, like, served and all that kind of stuff. Won't have servers or anything. Just like that kind of stuff will just be like, I imagine that will be the transition for her for next season.
And one thing that is quite frightening from an audience perspective is the fact that one of the only people that's actually looking out for her is Littlefinger.
Yeah.
the fact that she's now one of the people that she trusts is this man who is. We know what Littlefinger really is.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite a frightening thought.
It is.
Mm-hmm. But speaking of Sansa's protectors, I feel one of the characters that really came into his own in this season was Sandor Clegane, aka the Hound.
Yeah, he had a very interesting story where he is constantly not denying that he's a hero despite saving Sansa on multiple occasions, and then abandoning the king.
Blackwater really was his episode, I feel.
Yeah, I think he had it at that point, because I think his entire character has been so loyal to the king. Like, I noticed those kind of details throughout the entire, especially for season 1.
Yeah, well, I mean, in the scene when Ned gets captured and you win or you die, he attacks one of the Stark men, so he's still aligned with the king at that point.
Exactly. Yeah, and now to see him disband from the king, saying he's had enough, is quite interesting.
Fuck the king. Fuck the king's guard.
Because so far we've known his character to be very loyal, but now it's gotten to the point where, because of how much of a... I would say it's fueled by how shit of a king Joffrey is.
Yeah, you can see when Joffrey starts bossing around the Hound, like, the more he does it, the more Hound gets pissed off.
Yeah.
And I feel like the wildfire was the straw that broke the camel's back, because obviously he has that fear of fire because of what the mountain did to him when he was a child. And like when he sees that fire in Blackwater, it's just... That's the moment where he finally just gives it up. He finally leaves. Because he's pushed to the point where he just wants to go, and he does.
Yeah.
And like, no one can stop him. No one could stop him because he obviously is such a strong fighter. And you know, Joffrey can't stop him because... I like the detail that despite the fact that Joffrey is the king, he knows he can't stop the Hound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm like interested what the Hound does next, if he's going to leave King's Landing, because I think he said he was going to offer Sansa to go back home to Winterfell.
Yeah, but she declined him, I think.
Blackwater, but now, yeah.
But yeah, he said he might head north.
Yeah, it's possible that's where his character will be taken.
Of course, we had Shay, who we have already talked about, kind of. But like we said, I thought that she was actually surprisingly very good.
Yeah, I thought she was going to be one of the weak characters in this season. And I thought that like the relationship with Tyrion wasn't going to be that developed on, but it actually was, and it was actually surprisingly quite good.
Yeah, well the thing is about Shay is I feel one of the reasons why she works so well is because her first episode, she has such a strong grounding, and it all comes down to that scene that they have where they're telling stories. It's the scene where Tyrion tells a story about Tysha and Baelor, but it's that whole scene that really gives her a strong grounding as a character to develop.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I thought she was, again, like it just continued on, and her relationship with Tyrion, but also Sansa, and also her friendship with Varys as well, I really liked. And I like how she started to realize that you can't trust people.
Yeah, especially in King's Landing, which is a very dangerous place.
And there was that scene at the very end where she said to Tyrion, she said, "Why don't we go to Pentos and live a life together away from this?" And obviously Tyrion said, you know, but this is what I do. I'm good at this. I can't leave. Another one of Tyrion's sort of side characters was Bronn, the sellsword, who was commander of the City Watch after Jenna Slint after he was the wall. But then of course he was taken off the City Watch when Tywin came back.
Yeah.
Yes.
He was pretty much like he was in season 1.
Yep.
Because he's very much a character who isn't... Like, he always goes into detail, like, how he doesn't like to wear armor because it slows him down. So he's very much not the traditional like commander for like King's Landing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite interesting in seeing how him not adapting, but like understanding what the role is.
Yes.
And him not giving a fuck about it.
Well, yeah, one of the things I really liked about him is when the scene where Tyrion discovers the wildfire, Bronn advises against it. I thought that was very good use of his character. But then, of course, I think the other episode where Bronn got a lot of screen time that I really liked was Blackwater. Because he got that scene within the place where he was drinking and whoring with the Hound. I really liked that scene.
Yeah, I actually like that. Like after the bells went, how we went one more drink for the war, and they both had the drink together before the wolves died.
Yes.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and then of course that led into the actual battle itself, where that came around, where Bronn was having a great time. You know, he was shooting arrows of fire. He was the one that lit the fire that blew up the ships with the wildfire.
Yeah.
And I like the detail of like when Hound is starting to get PTSD from the fire and on the field, Bronn just looks at him like, "What are you doing?" And it's interesting how in the first scene together, it seemed like the Hound had a bit more power over him, but then in the end, Bronn had the advantage because he didn't have that fear of fire. In fact, he loved it. You could see that Bronn was one of the only ones on the field that wasn't scared. He was actually happy to be there, which is why I think he's such a strong fighter, because he doesn't have that, anxiety over dying, because he doesn't think he will. He's so confident that he's going to live that he just does. He's also brilliant comedic relief as well.
Yeah, like Bronn doesn't even he didn't have like a proper story this season like he did. He had more of a story first season because he was like.
Well, I mean, his whole story in this season revolved around the Battle of Blackwater and building up to that.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, but he's like a character that is just fun to watch.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we just said at the start of the season that the City Watch is like the police, and you can tell that he's one of those policemen that likes just arresting people. And
oh yeah, for sure.
He just has so much fun. And what was it? He said that him and the other City Watch members went around and killed all the known thieves. And it was really funny. I was like, oh my, Tyrion's like, why would you kill the known why would you kill those people? It's like, why would you do that? But then he explained, and it made sense that, in wars, the people that die are the ones that starve because the thieves take all the food. So he went around and killed all the thieves. I just really like that. I really like how he just does everything by force. And then I like that line from the Hound to Bronn about you love food, you love wine, and you love women. You like food, you like wine, you like money, and you like women. But what you really love is killing. And
yeah.
You can tell that he's right.
Yeah, pretty much.
Fun fact about the actor who plays Bronn, Jerome Flynn. I mean, obviously we already talked about in the trivia about how he was in a band that had #1 hits in the 90s, so he can sing, which is why he sang The Rains of Castamere and Blackwater. But, fun fact about Jerome Flynn, him and Lena Headey, who plays Cersei, actually dated at one point before the show. And when the show began, they made an agreement with the showrunners to never appear on screen together. So you notice that Bronn and Cersei are never in the same scenes. Ever. Which is interesting.
That's interesting.
Yes. Another brief character that was around Tyrion for a lot of Season 2 was Podrick Payne. And his main role is he sort of played a bit of a squire role for the most part, but his main moment that we got from him was in the Battle of Blackwater when he saved Tyrion after his face was sliced. Harpoon to the head, and then of course, in the episode 10, Tyrion said to Podrick, would you like to... Because now that Tyrion's in a vulnerable position, now that Tywin's back, he basically said to Podrick, it's like, would you like to protect me? Twice a day. Yeah, I mean, Podrick really didn't get much to do. He doesn't say many lines.
Yeah, I only noticed him, during, the last couple episodes.
Yeah, he was very much in the background for a lot of it. He is, the definition of, such a minor character.
Yeah.
But, interestingly, he does actually have quite a lot to do from here. which is very strange, but he does. Podrick actually has some very important scenes, but you'll have to wait and see for that. Following him, we have Lancel Lannister, who very much was taken down a peg in this, because in the first season he was abused by Robert Baratheon, and it was hilarious. And then he was the one that poisoned him, which was quite major. And it was revealed that he was sleeping with Cersei. But then in this season, Tyrion interrogates him about that. And then obviously he has to answer to all of Tyrion's questions. And I like the I like the comedic parts where Tyrion says to Lancel, he's like, "Please tell Bronn that if I ever in harm, that you authorize Bronn to kill you." And then Lancel has to say to him that it's like, "If Tyrion is under any harm, you are authorized to kill me." Same thing happens in Blackwater with the Hound as well. It's just really funny.
Oh yeah, it is.
Like, I don't know how to, like, it's kind of weird, but Lancel is such a fun character to get to see bullied, Of course,
it's because he looks like his face is like such a like child face, like but it's also quite punchable.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, because in a way he's quite cowardly as well, Lancel Lannister.
Yeah.
And also, one detail was that in Blackwater, Cersei, I mean, obviously she was very drunk at the time, but Lancel had just had an arrow shot into him on the field, and Cersei pushed him over, and he was in a lot of pain. So you got to imagine to yourself that his relationship with Cersei is probably over at this point. Because I can't see them being together beyond this point, because it just seems like she's just given up on him.
Pretty much, yeah.
And he's sort of been kicked to the wayside. Alright, shall we move on from Lancel Lannister?
Yes.
Okay, now let's move into what we had as last season as one of our favourite characters. And we'll see what we think of him this time round. Peter Baelish, aka Littlefinger.
I thought the season was good, but he very much did not appear as much as I would like him to.
He did a lot of travelling, and he also, because in the last season he very much played the game well, and he won a lot of his little tactical decisions, whereas I feel like here he sort of got taken down a peg, and he lost quite a bit.
Yeah. Because
obviously Cersei asserted her power over him, and so did Tyrion, and he was sent away to deliver the bones of Ned to Catelyn. And then of course, he was there for Renly's death, and he had those scenes with Loras and Marjorie, and then he briefly turned up out of nowhere at Harrenhal, which was a massive surprise. That was really cool. Then of course he stayed away from the danger until Blackwater was over, and then he returned in the final episode. So yeah, he didn't get as much screen time this season, but I still think for the parts that he did appear in, he was very effective.
Oh yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. One standout scene for him, I think, was the one with Catelyn in episode 4. I think it was 4. It was either 4 or 5. The one where he gave her Ned's bones.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a rough scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I feel like for a lot of especially the second half, I feel like Littlefinger was behind the scenes for a lot of it.
He was. He was very much not a presence on screen.
Yeah.
And in the story, like, as a overall package, but when he was on screen, he was very good.
Yes, but I think when you take into perspective, like, whenever Varys was off screen in season 1, it was always because he was up to something, and I feel like you got to take into consideration that because we didn't see Littlefinger for quite a bit of it, he was probably going around Westeros doing some things that Cersei didn't know about, or Tyrion didn't know about. And I think him going to Harrenhal was probably one of them.
Most probably, yeah.
Yeah. I really like that scene where it was very clear that he recognised Arya.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that scene was very well done.
Yes. Yeah, so I thought Littlefinger was good, but probably not as strong as he was last time.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. However, someone who I think... actually, no, before we get onto them, the one other scene I'll mention with Littlefinger was the scene with Ros in the brothel. That was another great scene with Littlefinger.
Oh yeah, that one was like very creepy, and it was like quite intense.
Mm-hmm. However, to mirror that, I feel his chess opponent, Varys, actually succeeded him here. I thought Varys had a lot more to do than Littlefinger this time round, and I feel Varys is very strong in this season.
I thought Varys was great.
Yeah.
I think he was probably one of the best characters in the season, because I think he continued on like what he did in season 1, and it was still as entertaining, it was still as intriguing, and his character is just so fun to watch.
I think in the especially in the first half, because that was the first half where he became friends with Shay, which was very, very interesting. I like how he started to say, "Hey, Tyrion, you do realize that I have some power over you because I know who she is."
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, there's that part in What Does Demon Ever Die where Tyrion interrogates... he asks questions to Varys, Littlefinger, and Pycelle. I like how Littlefinger and Pycelle suffered the consequences of that, with Pycelle being locked away because he was dealing with Cersei, and with Littlefinger, how Tyrion forced him to go across, and he was forced to do the orders of Cersei and Tyrion. Littlefinger was. However, I like there's that brilliant scene after that point where Varys and Tyrion are drinking together, and Varys makes that, he does that riddle about I think it's power, and it's like, would a soldier do the bidding of his king or his god or the person who pays him? And it was a really interesting scene about power, and I like how I just love Varys. He was great.
Oh yeah, thought it was bloody brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Very, very good Varys was. And I feel like now that Varys has taken a lot of the power back from Baelish, like the scene where he gets with Ros, where he sits down with Ros and has a very similar scene that Littlefinger had, except this time his manipulation wasn't as forceful. It wasn't as, I need you to be good so I can benefit from you. Whereas with Varys, he says, I want to work with you, not as you being a whore, but as you being almost a spy for me.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that. And also, I think Varys is quite a funny character as well.
Oh, he is. He's hilarious.
Yeah. Just his sort of... his passive just sarcasm, and also all the comedy surrounding the fact that he's a eunuch and the fact that he's self-aware of it. It's just really funny. But I think because him and Littlefinger were separate for this season, it wasn't as like electric, because in season 1 we got all those scenes of them together in the Red Keep.
Yeah.
That were just so awesome. But yeah, I thought Varys was great.
I agree. I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah. And like I said in the Blackwater review, I love the detail of the fact that he predicted that Stannis would lose, and he was right. Because I think Varys knew that Tywin was around.
Yeah, I think he knew how the fight was going to go. Because he very much has knowledge around, and that's what they've established his character to be. Like, even if other characters don't know things, even if they're in like high power, he has the tools to know everything that's going on around the situation.
Absolutely. Right, shall we move on from Varys?
Yes.
So we had a couple of whore characters. We had the main ones though were Ros and Daisy. Daisy was the one that was abused by for Joffrey's for what Joffrey wanted, but Ros was obviously the main one, and she was involved in quite a few storylines around her. The very start of the season, it was when Cersei had the City Watch killing all of Robert's bastard children. She was around for that, but yeah, I really liked how Ros finally started to realise that King's Landing wasn't what she thought it would be.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's very interesting because we mentioned it during the episodes. She's weirdly had her own like small arc throughout season 1 and 2, and she's become quite like a important side character.
Yeah, and also, like I said, even though King's Landing has not been kind to her, now we know if she had stayed in Winterfell, she would be dead.
Oh, for sure.
So yeah, it's turned out quite horrible for her.
Yeah, like she like witnessed like a child being murdered in front of her eyes. She's been having to abuse women for Joffrey's sick pleasure.
She was beaten. She was beaten at Cersei's command.
Yeah, and she was manipulated.
Yep,
it's like
manipulated by Littlefinger and Varys.
Yeah, so it very much seems like she's just had a really bad time with life in King's Landing.
Yeah, and I also really like the detail that like when Littlefinger gave her a night off, Pycelle had a different whore. So, but I think that very much suggests that, you know, obviously not only all of that, but as it was revealed in Fire and Blood, you know, she's having to sleep with Pycelle as well, which is obviously not going to be pleasant.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty horrible at the moment for Ros.
It is. It is for sure.
Yes. And I can't really see it getting much better. I mean, the only hope for her now is to be a spy for Varys, and she may find some peace.
Yeah, most probably.
Yeah, I thought one very strong scene with Ros was the one where Tyrion had to pretend that it was his whore.
Yeah, I actually quite like that.
Because that ties back to the very first episode of season 1, because they were together there.
Yes, it is.
Of course, as I've just mentioned, we also had Grand Maester Pycelle, played by Julian Glover.
Yes.
So we know based on the last episode of season 1 now that he is a complete facade. And in this season he is exposed by Tyrion, has his beard cut off and is put in a cell. And I think my favourite scene with Pycelle was in the final episode where he flipped the coin back to Tyrion.
Yeah, that was great. That was a nice callback.
God, why is it like his best scenes are always in the final episode?
Yeah. Yeah, I enjoyed the little parts he had.
Yeah, but I just love how Julian Glover manages to just pull off this character that is so different from his own personality. Because when you see him without the facade, it is very much Julian Glover being a natural actor, just playing a villain, right? You know, like, here for your troubles. Whereas when he's doing the whole, treason is treason, like, it's just, it's so different from who he is in real life, and like the way he drops his face, it just looks weird. But he just pulls it off so well. Like,
he does.
I mean, he is one of those legendary British actors, you know.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but I just really liked Pycelle's little role in this season. It was cool. That whole section where he was exposed and they had Bronn cut his beard off was just very amusing. Quite satisfying, really. You know.
Oh no, it wasn't. It must have been Varys the Spider. You can't trust him.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant character.
Oh yeah.
Then, of course, we had Marcella and Tommen. So with Marcella, she was shipped off to Dawn to broke peace with the Martells. So I think in terms of a tactical move, it made sense for Tyrion to do so. To get peace with the Martells, to get them on their side. And for Cersei, it was obviously horrible for her because she was losing her daughter.
Yes.
But yeah, but when the Dornish characters finally come into the fold, Marcella is obviously going to have to play a part in that because they now have, essentially, they have possession of her. which is interesting. And then the other one was Tommen, who the only real proper scenes he got. Well, firstly, there was the one where he cried when Marcella was shipped off and Joffrey told him to stop being such a soft, stupid child. And then the other big one was in Blackwater, where he was almost killed by his mother out of mercy.
Yeah. Yeah, that was... I remember watching that and I was just like... just really disturbed by it.
It was very disturbing because Tommen had absolutely no idea what was happening.
Yeah, because he's a child.
Like, he thought it was just, like, medicine, you know? Poor boy. Then we also had the High Septon, who only appeared in one scene, and he was played by the legendary Clegane, David Very, and he was killed by those damn homeless people.
Yep, he was.
What, do they rip his leg off or rip his arm off or something?
They tore him apart like they were fucking zombies. It was so cartoonishly, like, weird.
But it's like, of course he would have that kind of scene, wouldn't he?
Exactly. I mean, yeah. Of course they would. Let's introduce this character and then kill him off in the silliest way possible.
Do you know what would be really funny is, like, when Cersei says to Tyrion, she says, "Someday when you love someone, I will take her away from you. Or I'll take them away from you," right? Because she says that about Marcella being shipped off. What if he turned around and said, "Get some perspective, woman"?
I mean, I think I made that joke in that reaction.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, but I'm just very angry that he was killed. Very angry.
Yes.
You know what was also something that was hilarious about him is there's a wide shot where you can very clearly see he's not saying the words that he's saying.
Yeah.
They've voiced over his words with ADR and he's just muttering nonsense.
Yeah.
God. So funny. It's just like one of those cool little Easter eggs, I think.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Sure.
I like the fact that he's dead now and Pycelle... It actually, this time around, it makes sense why Pycelle says at the end, it's like,
Oh, I Septon said that you don't have to marry Sansa.
when he's obviously full of shit.
Mm-hmm.
Another character that got a very brief amount of screen time was Zedontas Hollard. The only scenes he really got was there was the first one in episode 1 where he turns up late to his fight, and then Joffrey tries to drown him with wine, but Sansa stops him. So obviously, you know, Zedontas Hollard is thankful that Sansa saved his life, because he was almost drowned. And then the only other brief little scene he got was in Blackwater, where he was juggling to sort of add to the chaos of the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just a little setup, I think, in the sense that it's very obvious that Zedontas Hollard hates Joffrey, and he's thankful to Sansa, and that's all there really is to his character, other than the fact that he's he's sort of a clown, a drunk clown. Then we also had Marin Trent, who also had a very little amount of screen time. I believe after episode 6 he didn't appear again. Like the only scene I can really remember him in was the one where Tyrion ordered him to go save Sansa from the rapists, and Marin Trent said, "I only take orders from the king." Very small character he is.
He is.
It just seems to me like his existence was to give Arya a name on her list.
Yeah.
Because he was the one. His first appearance is where he killed Syrio Forel in season 1. But yeah, he gets barely any screen time this time around, I think.
Yeah, he doesn't really get anything.
I can't actually remember because there's that scene where he has to back down because he knows that it's either the Hound or Bronn is gonna like kill him or something. But I think that might even be episode 10 of last season. So I don't even know if that happened this time round. Moving on, we have Jenna Slint, who only appeared in the first 2 episodes. He was the commander of the City Watch who betrayed Ned Stark. And in this time round, at the end of the first episode, he is commanded by Cersei to kill all of Robert's bastard children. And then after that point, and he's given the castle of Harrenhal briefly. and then in episode 2 Tyrion sends him to the wall and he loses that castle. But yeah, his very brief appearance, I liked his role in the story for that. Again,
Yeah, I agree.
Again, like similar to some of the others, he's a very, very minor character, but he has quite a big role in events. Because if it wasn't for him selling out to Cersei, Ned wouldn't have been captured. If you know what I mean? And if it wasn't for him, again, selling out to Cersei, being the policeman he is, all of those babies wouldn't have been killed. So I like how that sometimes these very small characters have these very important moments in the story.
Yeah, because it makes the world feel more lived in. It makes every character, even if how little they are, feel consequential.
Because if you think about it, like it's happened many times now. Mirri Maz Dor killed Khal Drogo essentially, and then
and she only has a small little story.
Yeah, and Lancel Lannister killed Robert Baratheon, and he was the king. He was the fucking king. So sometimes these very small characters can have a big impact. We also briefly had Helen the Pyromancer, who was voiced by Roy DeTroyce, who does the novels for the audiobooks. I really liked him. He was cool. I liked his little bit with the wildfire. And I just loved how, in Blackwater, how enthusiastic he was about seeing the wildfire. He was just very happy to see it. It's just a nice little character. Mandon Moore only had a very brief appearance in Blackwater. He was the one that you thought looked like Michael Keaton. That was very strange, isn't it?
I know, he looks so similar to Michael Keaton.
Yeah.
But obviously not Michael Keaton.
Yeah, but he was so minor. He was such a minor character. He really got nothing.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the Hill Tribesmen appeared in Blackwater in the battle, and that follows on from Season 1, from Tyrion running into the Hill Tribesmen. And now their story is over, because now Tywin has paid them what they're owed, and they've gone back to the Vale.
Yeah. Yep, bye-bye.
Yes. So, I think that's everything in King's Landing.
Yeah. King's Landing, I think, was a very strong aspect of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I enjoyed mostly what was involved with King's Landing.
Well, it's kind of the centerpiece of the show, and I feel like if King's Landing is suffering, then the whole show suffers.
Yeah, because obviously it's... The Iron Throne is the be-all, end-all of this world, being king. So it would be odd if it wasn't one of the more well-focused on things in the show and story. So yeah, I think it is pretty much one of the best aspects of the show so far.
Yes. Right, let's move on to Winterfell with Bran Stark.
Yeah, Bran, I thought was quite interesting this season because he very much was king of Winterfell while everybody was away. People like Robb, who is now like the official like Lord of Winterfell. He's
the king in the north, Robb is.
Yeah, also king in the north. The whole thing that was established last season.
Yeah, so Bran was staying in his place while Robb wasn't there.
Yeah, Bran had to learn how to rule over people to help with people's problems. Yeah, and also learn at the same time.
And being a cripple too.
Yeah. He is very much handed like the almighty challenge of being how young he is with one of the most important jobs you could have in the north.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the first half we get a little bit more of the visions, but we don't really get to see them as much. It's more so he tells us what he sees. And one of the visions he sees is, the sea coming over the walls of Winterfell and Roderick Hessel drowning in them, and obviously that foreshadows the death of Roderick Hessel when Theon beheads him. So I like how in the first half Bran is very much speaking from his visions, and those visions are coming true. And then in the second half, it's very much dealing with the fact that Theon takes over.
Yeah.
Bran he's hard to talk about because he doesn't really have much of a character, but he's very important to the plot.
He's interesting, but he doesn't have he hasn't got like an actual story yet.
Yeah, And his personality is quite bland when you really think about it.
The actor is like the young child actor is good, but it feels like we're waiting for his like show story to get started. We're only getting like drips of it within 2 seasons, so I feel like that next season they really need to start developing who he is, what's his story, and what his motivations going forward.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why is because when he first starts out in season 1, he very much does have a personality, but that's taken away by his accident.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of feels a bit empty.
In the first episode of the show, he has like quite a lot of personality because he's so adventurous, he's so skillful in climbing, that makes him give like he wants a sense of adventure, a sense of risk. But now he's forced to be leader and sit down and deal with daily quarrels, stuff like that.
Yeah. But yeah, I feel like, I mean, he obviously has quite a strong, commanding confidence for a child, but I think just beyond that, his personality doesn't quite have a lot to it. He is a bit generic, I feel. Yeah.
I see what you mean.
Yeah, but again, like I said, his role in terms of the plot itself is quite interesting. Since that he sees these visions, and then his dynamic with other characters, like the scenes that he has with other characters, do have some very interesting parts in them. Like his scenes with Theon, his scenes with Maester Lewin, his scenes with Osha. I think those are really interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
For a lot of the first half, he's very much having to deal with the Northmen that need support because they have lost a lot of their bannermen because they're fighting on Robb's war, and I like the fact that they use that to show the consequence of war. But yeah. Yes, he is still the crippled boy, and he will be forever.
Yeah.
But I think one of the most interesting characters around Bran was Maester Lewin.
Maester Lewin was great. I thought he was really good within the Winterfell storyline.
Yes.
Man, it's so interesting like how your perspective on an actor can change when they're put in a well-written story.
Absolutely.
And they're suited to a character that goes along with.
I mean,
how they
Donald
act.
Sumter absolutely suits Maester Lewin's character to a T.
Yeah, exactly, for sure.
He has that calm, warm, grandfatherly figure, and around Bran, he is very much a great advisor for him, which is why you can believe that Bran would be so heartbroken by his death at the end.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
Because he's looked after him his whole childhood.
Yeah, and he's also one of the nicest characters in the show who's like so genuine.
Yeah. But I think, whilst as I really like the scenes with Maester Lewin and Bran, especially the one that he has at his bedside in the early part, for me, the best scenes with Maester Lewin are the ones he has with Theon Greyjoy. He's so good in those. Because in those scenes, he's actually challenged by someone who's talking back to him, someone who doesn't respect him. Or at least he's pretending not to. And I think probably my favourite scene with Maester Lewin is the one where Theon is about to behead Roderick and Maester Lewin tries to calm him down.
Yeah.
That was very strong.
That scene in general was just so intense.
Yeah. And then of course you get in the final episode when Theon starts to confess about, what he's been doing is wrong and he's come too far. I like how Maester Lewin still is there for him. He's still advising him. He doesn't give up on him. It's just interesting, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
And of course he gets murdered by Dagmar, which is really sad. I honestly think it's interesting how Maester Lewin is such a minor character, but he has quite a sad ending. I'm actually quite sad about his ending. But it felt like it came at the right time, though. For the story.
I would say so. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, very good character, Maester
He is.
Hodor. I mean, what can you really say about Hodor? He's tall.
Hodor.
He's tall and he says Hodor.
Hodor.
One character that I felt got quite a bit to do this season was Osha.
She did. She interestingly had like quite a lot to do within the Winterfell storyline. Like she has become quite a resourceful wildling prisoner.
Yeah.
It is now taking care of Bran. It's interesting to see where she's come from since season 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure.
Yeah, she's becoming less wild and more composed, and I like how she's becoming tactical now, like the bit where she manipulates Theon.
Yeah, she's very resourceful.
Yeah, and she finds a way to she obviously kills that guard, and she sneaks Bran, Rickon, Hodor and the direwolves around, and basically she's one of the reasons why they could escape. And yeah, I thought she was really, again, like you said, quite resourceful. I can't say the same, though, for Rickon Stark, because we're 2 seasons in, and he barely has any character at all.
He is just a kid.
Yep. Like, he's possibly one of the most pointless characters. He really means absolutely nothing, and it's
hard to argue that.
It's not like it's a show exclusive thing either, because it's the same thing in the books. Like, Rickon Stark is absolutely nothing in the books as well. I don't even know why he's there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is it just to fill up that whole thing of everything needs to be 7, like the 7 gods, the 7 children?
I guess. I don't know.
Because he is literally there just to be a child. Like, what do we... I mean, okay, what... The only thing I can really think of that Rickon added to the plot this season was the fact that he cracks those nuts, and those nuts get found by the Ironborn, so they can track that they were there. That's all he added to the whole season, I think. I can't say anything about him beyond that. He did more in season 1 even. Like, he had those scenes where he had the same dreams as Bran, and he also, was thinking realistically. But this season, he just got nothing at all.
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much.
To move on from one of the most pointless characters, Rickon, we have what I think, surprisingly, is one of the strongest characters in this whole season. And that's Theon Greyjoy.
I'd say he's the strongest. I think what they do with his character this season is so inspired. I think his story of feeling so worthless, feeling so pathetic, and then tries to do everything he can to feel respected, and doing the darkest thing he can think of by betraying the family that grew him, raised him, killing people who in some ways probably were his mentors growing up, and figures, like idolized figures. He kills Roderick, he kills 2 farmers' boys and plays them off as the 2 Stark boys. He, while all this is happening, feels so conflicted of what he's actually doing, so desperate to try to get respect. It's so interesting how his character is taken this season, and to go along with that, the performance of the actor is some of the best acting I've seen in media.
Yep. Alfie Allen was amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Like, brilliant. And this is one of the examples where things that they added on top of the source material absolutely worked. He was so good in this season. I love the fact that in the first season they planted all these seeds, but he was very much a background character.
Pretty much.
And then as soon as he leaves Robb and goes to the Iron Islands, his story starts to get a lot of screen time, and it's a bit like, I think at first you were a bit like, this is interesting how he's getting all this screen time, because you didn't expect him to get it, like this kind of character, and then it just evolved over time, and it just became this amazing thing. And I think, for me, the episode that really highlights his character in this season was episode 6, was the one where he took Winterfell and beheaded Roderick Cassel. That was some of the best stuff in the whole season, I think. But we also you got to talk about that very awesome bit of direction where he was going to write that letter to Robb, but then he burned it in the candle and he was sitting in the corner of a black screen. That was just such brilliant poetic direction, I think.
I agree.
But yeah, just seeing the conflict with the performance from Alfie Allen for Theon Greyjoy was just brilliant. It was so something to witness, you know. I also think his storyline got some of the most powerful music as well from
I agree.
from the composer. Just so much conflict, so much just desperately wanting to be respected, and him doing horrible things to the people that raised him just to get it. And then the fact that by the time he's retracted, by the time he's realized that it's too late, by the time he realizes that what he's done is irredeemable and that he has no means of escape, his only option is death, he makes that brave war cry, the fact that he's going to be like, you know what, I'm going to sacrifice my life in battle so I'm remembered for something. And then he's knocked out by Dagmar and he's given over to the Boltons. And the only person that knows that he regretted any of the things he did was Maester Lewin, and he's dead.
Yeah.
So the only person in the world that knows that he regrets all of these things he's done is himself, and no one will believe him. Because now everyone in the North thinks that he's a complete piece of shit.
Pretty much because of what he does.
Yep. Because he invades his own home. Is the one that he was brought up in by Ned Stark. It's such a captivating story. And despite all the horrible things he does, no one respects him. None of the Ironborn respect him, none of the people in the North respect him. He gets worse than what he was.
Yeah, and he has nothing and is seen as a pathetic coward traitor.
Yeah. It was such a brilliant storyline.
Yeah.
Along with Theon, we got a bunch of new characters. One of them was his sister, Yara Greyjoy. One of the weirdest parts was when he first went to Pike and he started like feeling her up, and then he found out that it was his sister.
Yeah, that was really weird.
Yeah. But I really liked how like everyone on Pike didn't respect him, even though he was the son of Baelon. They just didn't care about him because he wasn't strong. And I really liked that scene when Yara came to Winterfell and basically laid it on the table that no one respected him even after what he did. And she said that what he was doing was stupid. But I really liked how she represented what the Ironborn actually believed in. And there was that, obviously, that bit of... there was that detail of, you know, when Theon came to the Iron Islands, he was wearing a skirt and she was wearing pants. It's essentially just put it on the table that she was the strongest of the two. And of course we had his father, who was a very cold man, Balon Greyjoy.
Yeah.
Like, because we talked about how like Stannis Baratheon's quite a cold character, but there is a lot of like honor to him. There's a lot of sides to him that you can understand his sort of you can understand his motivations, and he's quite a respectable character in some regards, even though he does these horrible things. Whereas Balon is completely cold. Like, he is so just... he is just such a just gross person, Balon Greyjoy. There's nothing about him that's redeemable. And it's not like Joffrey, where he's like this Hitler child, where he does these horrible things. He's just such a sack of shit, but Balon, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I feel absolutely no sympathy towards him at all.
No.
And one thing that I really do like, though, there was one very specific bit of direction that they gave around him in episode 3, where Theon was ranting about how his life has been unfair and how he has been treated badly and how he came home to this. I like the fact that it pauses and Balon's looking in the camera's direction away from his son, and he pauses and you can see that he actually realizes that Theon's right. He actually recognizes that what he's saying is true, but then he doesn't turn around to acknowledge it, he just walks away. I think for me that was the best Balon part of this season.
I agree.
But I just love the whole thing about how Balon lays it on the table that the Ironborn are known for, their whole culture is around being these tough people that take what they want, yet they are such a failure of a house.
Oh yeah, like they feel like quite a pathetic family, a pathetic army, and just with no real skill, with no real backbone.
Yeah,
it's
because you know, we learned in season 1 that there were 2 different rebellions. The Roberts Rebellion at the Battle of Trident against Rhaegar Targaryen was a very hard fought battle, whereas the Greyjoy Rebellion that happened later on was piss easy. Like Ned and Robert completely dismantled his family just with ease. But yeah, I think Balon just having absolutely no respect for his son, it just adds to Theon's character arc, I think. And I think it really says something that Theon was willing to betray Robb to try and get this man's respect.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. That seems that way.
I think one of the scenes we haven't talked about though, was the one where Theon was baptized by the Drowned God, and how I like how, despite the fact that that happens, you can still see a lot of conflict in him. Yeah,
it's a nice little detail he has.
Yes.
Especially just throughout the season.
Yes. So another character we had in Theon's storyline was Dagmar Cleftjaw, who was the one that gave him the boat that he needed to go to Winterfell. And interestingly, Dagmar Cleftjaw is one of those characters that I always forget exists until I rewatch season 2. But I liked how the whole time he was trying to give advice to Theon about what he should do to be a true Ironborn, to be respected by the people around him, and then in the end he just betrays him. He just knocks him out, kills Maester Lewin and leaves, because he's just sort of like, this boy is just so stupid and pathetic. But yeah, it's interesting that we talk about how strong of a character story Theon has in this season, when I feel like Dagmar is quite a forgettable character, even though he plays an important role, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know,
I
it's
think
weird.
What makes his storyline so good is because of Theon and the actor. He just elevates his story on his own.
It's interesting because I feel like Theon, the characters that surround Theon in this season are the most forgettable, but for some reason the storyline works because all of these little pieces in the puzzle fit together to benefit his one character, if you know what I mean. Like all of those very small characters that we don't really think that much of, like Yara, like Balon, like Dagmar, like Roderick Cassel, like Maester Lewin, and, you know, Bran and Rickon, right? They don't have that much character to them compared to a lot of the others in Westeros, but they serve a very good purpose in Theon's story. And Roderick Cassel obviously being one of them, where at the very start of the season, he gets sent back to Winterfell by Robb. Catelyn doesn't need him anymore to protect her, so he gets sent him back to Winterfell. There's a man at arms there. But then, of course, we find out that it was only for Theon to behead him, which was one of my favourite scenes of the whole season. And it's interesting how Roderick Cassel was such a minor role for the whole show until his very last scene. And I thought in the very last scene he was in, he was so good. Like when he spat in Theon's face, and then he says, you know, what did he say to Theon at the end? It was like something about the gods. Like, may the gods have mercy on you or something. I can't remember what he said. But that detail of Theon going to behead him, and it took multiple strikes, and then he had to kick his head off.
Yeah, that was one of like the most emotionally charged scenes of the whole season.
Oh, and I really like the line where he looks at Bran and says, "I'm about to join your father."
Yeah, that's a really, really good line.
Yeah, and also you got to think he's also about to join his son as well because his son died at the hands of Jaime. Anything else you want to say about any of those characters in the Winterfell or Iron Island storyline?
No, I think Theon being like the backbone of that story is like, I can't overstate like how good his character story is.
Mm-hmm.
And the actor is bloody phenomenal. It's like so weird at how his story is like one of my favourite parts of this show so far.
It's so good. It's one of those ones. I would you say it's one of those ones that you're intrigued to see where it goes from here?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because now that
I'm really looking forward to seeing
that he's been handed over to the Boltons.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. All right. Shall we move on to Karth?
Yeah,
Right. So we have Daenerys Targaryen.
we do.
Where are my dragons?
Where are my dragons?
Yeah.
Where are my acting skills?
Now, one thing I do have to say about her before we begin is that in between season 1 and 2's filming, Emilia Clarke had 2 brain aneurysms.
Ooh, that's rough.
Yeah, brain bleeds and she was in hospital, and she had to relearn how to play this character and had to relearn all of Dothraki as well.
Yeah, that's rough.
So yeah, that was very rough for her. And I think, considering that it felt seamless, I think that was quite admirable of her. The fact that she still feels like the same character, I think that was quite good. The fact that she managed to relearn how to play, relearn how to play this character despite having some potentially life-threatening, injuries to her brain.
Yeah, for sure.
But that is not the bottom line, because obviously it all comes down to how the story is written. And whilst I think they captured some of the elements of the Karth storyline that I like some of the some of the introduction to it, I like the fact that they're deserted and they're trying to find somewhere to go. One of her Dothraki men gets beheaded and sent back his head and not burned. That was interesting. In fact, that they find Karth with the whole Garden of Bones thing, and the fact that she has to, get her way in. There's some interesting characters like Pyat Pree, Zarazone Doxos, the Spice King. But I think where this storyline fails for me is how they changed it, and the fact that they made it so that Zarazone Doxos had to invoke whatever that was where he cut his hand to let her in, which was different. Then we had her dragons being taken from her, and we had the scene where the warlocks, well, in the show it's literally just Pyat Pree as a bunch of clones, kill the 13 who are completely underdeveloped. The only one we really got any development from, aside from Zaro and Pyat Pree, was the Spice King. I liked him, he was a good character, and I liked the scene he had with her at the staircase. That was really good. But I feel like them being killed kind of just flattened that whole 13 storyline, because we didn't know anything about the rest of them.
We don't know how they worked. We don't know what how the city really worked. It just felt like it didn't feel like anything if I didn't care, and I don't. As a whole package, I don't care. Yeah, I feel like that's one of the biggest blunders the show has done so far. Yeah, actually, it's probably the biggest. I'd say that's the.
Yeah, and of course, like we revealed when we reviewed episode 10, the vision she got in the House of the Undying. So obviously, her motivation for going there was different, because now she wanted to rescue her dragons rather than go there to seek, inner peace, seek, just motivation for her life. Because at this point in the story, she's very much lost a lot of things, and in the books, obviously she's much younger and she's trying to find herself as a person. So she goes to the House of the Undying to sort of find herself. And the visions she sees are very different, and there's less of them. And I feel like, whilst it's kind of interesting, we see her in the Red Keep, which sort of foreshadows a scene that we get, in season 8. I'm sure you already know about that.
Oh, yeah.
And then, of course, there's a scene at the wall where she goes into the tent with Khal Drogo and her unborn son. And that's all we really got. And then she burned Pirate Pri with her dragons and left. And she left Zaro in the vault. And to me, this storyline in the books is one that's quite an interesting one. It's very different. It's not a dramatic storyline. It's very much focused around her character finding herself, going to the House of the Undying, finding out more about her past, finding out about who she is as a person, her place in the world, everything like that. Hinting at things for the future, just prophecies and all that. It's all interesting. But here, I felt the storyline in the show with Karth was a very generic one, and it was very rushed.
Yeah,
like the way I would describe the Karth storyline in the show is average.
Yeah,
it's very average.
Like, I feel like that this is not going to be that beneficial going forward, like in terms of like characters development. Like I said at the beginning of this recap, it feels like a pit stop.
Yeah.
There were so many things that happened that I just didn't really understand where they were going. Like, for example, like that woman with the whole thing on her head.
Oh,
like,
Quaithe. Yeah.
Yeah, that was brought up like what, twice?
Yeah.
And I don't understand. I guess it was. I don't know what really the point of that was. Overall.
Okay, well now I can actually talk about her, because there was things I couldn't say in the reviews, right? But Quaithe is odd to talk about because... Okay. So, one thing that I said about her is that her and Jaqen H'ghar have something in common. And that is that Quaithe is also a faceless man.
Mm-hmm.
However, the problem is, in the books, Quaithe turns up at multiple points in the story, and she's sprinkled all throughout the story, and she foreshadows a bunch of events.
Right.
The problem is, in the show, we never see her again.
Right.
So this is the only time she ever appears.
That's a problem.
Yeah, so this is the only time she ever appears, and it feels weird. And the only purpose it ever serves is just a little bit of character development for Jorah. That's it.
Yeah. But even then we get that with the scenes between him and Daenerys.
Yeah, I would say Jorah Mormont was probably the only character in the Karth storyline that was still pretty good. He was the only one that remained consistent.
I think he was the only character that felt like he advanced.
Pretty much, yeah.
Dany didn't advance really.
I mean, Daenerys got more power, more money, more ships.
She became more brutal.
And became more brutal, yeah. But it was very generic, wasn't it?
Yeah, just Karth as a story feels so inconsequential.
My favourite scene in Karth is the scene where they're talking about what's going on in Westeros, when she finds out that Robert Baratheon's dead. And when Daenerys is starting to discover that Jorah is in love with her. And one of the reasons why I like it is because it mirrors a scene with Stannis Baratheon. So it's more about the thematic linking of the story rather than the actual Karth storyline itself. If you know what I mean. Because that was the only really, really good scene in the Karth storyline, I feel, was that one. And that wasn't about her where she was, it was about what was going on the other side of the world, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was weird. Very weird. I mean, I do like the whole scene where they're in the marketplace, I suppose. That was cool. It was neat. You know, when she saw Pirate Pri clone himself. It was interesting, but it didn't really do anything beyond that with the story. It wasn't really followed up on that much, aside from the fact that we find out that Pirate Pri can clone himself of sorts. I don't know. It's weird. But yeah, I feel like where it really fell downhill was episode 7 when the Pirate Pri killed the 13. That was just so bizarre, and how Zara's own Doxus just suddenly said, "Oh, and yes, I was part of the deal." It was just so rushed. It felt like it came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And then there was that whole section in the final episode where it's revealed that Dorea, stabbed her in the back. She betrayed Daenerys, and it was just like, I just feel like it could have been so much better than what it was.
Oh, for sure it could have been.
Yeah, I don't know. But and it's a shame because a lot of those characters that were killed or died in this season in Karth are actually still alive in the books and still have quite a big role in Daenerys' story.
Yeah.
But now we're going to have to move on with her without those characters. Like Zarazo and Doxus is one of them, because he's still alive and he's still very much a big part of her story in the books, but I don't know, they just cut him from the story. And Quaithe as well, like you said, Quaithe is gone. Like that was all she had, and it feels like she was just such a half-baked character. She was just there to foreshadow events and to slightly develop Jorah's character, and that's it. And she never appears again, which is just bizarre. Because I think, why wouldn't you want to keep her, popping up every now and then like she does in the books? Because she could be interesting. But yeah, like we said, I feel like the only character that was really strong in the Karth storyline was Jorah. That was it.
Yeah, I'd probably say so.
I did really like this performance of the guy who played the Spice King, though. I just feel like it was just, once he was killed, it was like, oh well, we've now lost the strongest antagonist in the whole storyline.
Great.
Yeah,
I thought the actor was great.
Yeah,
Like that scene in the staircase, I thought was phenomenal.
It was great. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's just like when he was killed.
I just wish we got more of that.
When he was killed, it was like, okay, so we've now lost the best antagonist in this storyline, and he's been replaced by Pyat Pree, who we know absolutely nothing about apart from him being a warlock. And I think that's the problem, is that originally Pyat Pree was not a villain in the books. He was just a warlock.
Yeah. But no, you're going to make a villain now.
Yeah, it's just bizarre.
We need to be shocking.
Yeah,
for this pit stop.
Yeah, so I don't really have anything else to say about Karth, really. Disappointing, I think. Right, shall we move on to Beyond the Wall?
Yeah.
Much better with than Karth. Yes. Jon Snow.
His character was very intriguing this season, because it feels like his whole loyalty, especially in the second half of the season, was called into question.
Well, I mean, the first half as well, because the first half at Craster's Keep, he was loitering around doing what he shouldn't have been doing. Yeah. And I love that detail of when he discovers that Craster is giving his sons to the White Walkers. And then...
Oh, yeah.
And then he finds out that Mormont knows that that's what's happening.
Yeah, I agree. I thought that was great.
Then, of course, that once the Craster's Keep storyline ended, they moved on to the Fist of the First Men, towards the Wildling camp, where he met Corran Halfhand, and then, of course, he met Ygritte as well. Yeah,
those scenes between Jon and Ygritte are very intriguing.
Yeah, I thought that was some of the.
I
thought that was some of the strongest of the season. Honestly, I loved them.
Yeah, because it went through like Jon's thought process, like, is all of this stuff on the wall like really worth it for him as a person? Is it that satisfying? Is it that the be all and end all? Like, I thought Ygritte was I feel like that Ygritte is a character that could have gone really wrong really quickly, but because of the writing for her
and the performance,
she becomes a very and the performance,
and because Kit Harington and Rose Leslie have brilliant chemistry on screen, to the point where they are now married in real life.
That's chemistry for you.
It is chemistry, a much better chemistry than he has with a certain other person.
Oh, I can't possibly think of who you're referencing there.
But yeah, I thought Jon's story was really solid. I thought everything Beyond the Wall was very solid in this season. Aside from, the only thing that I was iffy on was the very last scene with the White Walkers. At the very last scene of episode 10. That was weird. You know, the scene where the White Walker looks at Sam, that was like, oh, I don't know about that. But apart from that one small nitpick, I thought everything beyond the wall was very solid.
Mm-hmm.
And like Theon Greyjoy, Jon was surrounded by some characters that are quite forgettable in the grand scheme of things, but they have a big impact on a story, and I think Corran Halfhand is one of them. Because he very much...
Yeah.
Him being that person, that ranger who lasted beyond the wall during the winter, but then we find out it's because he's a tactical person. Then the fact that he sacrifices his life for tactical for the Night's Watch to get the trust of the wildlings for Jon Snow. I really like that detail. And then, of course, leading back to what Varys was saying about men in the world having weaknesses that he doesn't. We talked about Tyrion's weakness with Shay. Very much so, Jon has a weakness with women too. In the sense that he couldn't behead Ygritte.
Yeah. He's too easily attached, I'd say.
Yes, but also I think Ygritte, because she's got red hair, she very much reminds him of Ros. If you know what I mean? Which leads back to the whole thing he was talking about with Sam in season 1. And it's like, you know, he just can't hurt a woman. He doesn't have it in him. But yeah, I thought Jon was very good. His whole storyline was very solid. Yeah.
I agree. I thought it was very solid indeed.
Yeah, another very enjoyable part of the season for me was Samwell Tarly. Because I liked how, building up to this, he very much talks about how he's like, I miss girls. And then he meets Gilly, who's one of Craster's wives, or daughter wives. And he feels a lot of attached. He gets attached, and he feels a lot of sympathy for her. You know, he gives her that thing, that sewing thing that his mother gave him. And then after they leave Craster's Keep, all he can do is just talk about her. And I think there's some really funny scenes with him and Gren and Edison Tollett. He's like, I read it in a book. It was great, yeah. I really liked Sam.
I agree. I thought his little story was interesting. And obviously we had the cliffhanger at the end with him, which was interesting to say the least.
Yes. Oh, and of course there was that one very brief scene where they dug up some dragon glass at the First of the First Men. But I really liked it. I really liked him, and I really liked, the other small characters like, Pipgrim, Rast, Edison. They really added to it. The Wall's
characters are very intriguing.
Yes. Because
the Wall as a concept brings quite a lot of interesting characters, because you would have to, because of what the Wall in concept is.
Yes. I like that there was that detail about how I think Cersei was talking to Alton Lannister about how, those men beyond the wall are protecting us from all harm, and then it cuts straight to them talking about fart jokes, at Craster's Keep. That was really funny.
Yeah.
Yes. But of course, Jorah Mormont, I think he mainly appeared in the first half, because the reason why is because Jon splits off and goes with Corran Halfhand for the second half.
Yeah, pretty much.
But I did really like that detail, obviously, with Craster's Keep. I think that was where he got most of his screen time. And like I said, I really like that detail that Jorah Mormont knows that what Craster's doing to his sons. And it makes the Wall storyline a lot more complicated than just defending by force.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
There's a tactical, political side to defending the Wall as well, which is interesting. I think the misconception is that the Wall is only a fantasy element, in the sense that they are defending against wildlings and White Walkers, and it's all very straightforward, but then you realise that it isn't, in the sense that one of the reasons why the White Walkers are being kept at bay is because Craster is offering his sons to them to buy time. And also, if you notice the eyes of the White Walker that was taking the child of Craster, that White Walker was the same one that rode the horse that saw Sam at the end. It was one of the riders. Because it was one of the tall ones with white hair and blue eyes, which was an actual White Walker, not the the human whites that get converted. And we also were introduced to Lord of Bones as one of the wildlings who wanted to kill Jon straight away, but then of course Ygritte said, I think Mance Rayder will want to decide for himself. And I like the detail that, like, if it wasn't for Mance Rayder, all these wildlings would just kill each other because they don't agree on anything. But the only one thing that's uniting all of them together is the fact that they all follow Mance Rayder, which makes him quite a special person, I think. The fact that Mance Rayder had this ability to unite like 100,000 wildlings together, that takes a lot of respect,
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's doing a really good job of building up Mance Rayder before you get to see him. It's very similar to what they did with Stannis in Season 1. You very much learn about who this person is before you see them. So, yeah. Are you looking forward to seeing Mance Rayder next season?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yes. There's some interesting trivia about him, actually, but we'll get to that. Yeah, so anything else you want to say about any of the characters beyond the wall, like Craster or Gilly or any of those?
No, I don't have that much to say.
Yeah.
I think it was all just quite interesting stuff.
Is there something to be said that Craster is quite similar to Walder Frey in the sense that he marries his daughters? Or he breeds with his daughters?
Yeah, it's interesting how they introduce those kinds of families so close together. It is a bit odd. I think in terms of structuring those, it could have been a bit better, I don't know.
Well, no, they're just very similar. The fact that they both bed with their daughters. Like, they are both very similar characters in some ways.
Yeah.
It's just that they play quite a different role in the story, that's all, because Walder Frey, obviously is there to have the bridge that Robb needs to cross for the war against Tywin Lannister, whereas Craster is there to offer sons to the White Walkers. Yeah, I don't know, but they are quite similar characters, aren't they?
They are. I think Jorah Mormont is a bit creepier though.
You mean Walder Frey?
Walder Frey, sorry. Yeah.
I mean, I can understand why it's a bit difficult to remember all these names. There's so many of them.
There's a lot.
It's a lot. Yes. Alright, shall we move on to the next storyline?
Yes.
Okay, now we move on to one of my favourite storylines in the season, and at the head of it is one of the most interesting characters in the whole show, and that is Stannis Baratheon.
Yeah, Stannis' story is like, it goes from interesting to really weird to like quite intense, all within one season, and it's like very well done.
Yeah, I love it. Every scene with Stannis Baratheon is great, I think.
Yeah, I'd say he's one of the most underrated actors, I think, in the story.
Well, that's the thing, because I think Stephen Delane's performance is very much, he's uncharismatic. He's not likable.
Nuance.
Yeah,
it's quite nuanced kind of performance.
Yeah, because he's not meant to be likable. He's meant to feel like he's not a charismatic person, but he has such strength on screen despite that. Because I think Stannis is just such a unique character. He's unlike anything I've ever seen. The fact that he is such a cold heart, the fact that he has no love, no personality, but he is the rightful heir to the throne by honor. He follows the same code that Ned Stark does in terms of honor. He believes that he should be on the throne because it's right that he is on the throne, not because of greed, not because of wanting to power like Joffrey, but because
it's the right thing to do.
Because it's the right thing to do. And what separates him from Ned is that he doesn't have that kind heart, so he's going to do anything. He's going to do it by any means necessary to get there. He's going to buy ships from a pirate. He's going to listen to the words of a witch, and kill his own brother. He's going to just everything. And I think one of the most interesting things about him is, despite all of this, despite the fact that he saw himself in the fire that Melisandre saw, the fact that he was prophesied to be the prince that was promised, the chosen one, the Azor Ahai, the one that would lift the flaming sword with the blue eyes. The fact that it all lined up for him and he failed. And then we saw in the very last episode him starting to realise that, look at all the things I did to fail. Like, the fact that it was all just a waste. The fact that he murdered his brother. The fact that he was unfaithful to his wife. All of it. The fact that he wasted his money on all those ships. The fact that all his men died. Well, lots of his men died for it.
Yeah. That whole battle in general just, I think, is so well built up to.
Absolutely. And also, you know, we saw in Blackwater, he is so different to Joffrey. He's almost the complete opposite of Joffrey in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah. They, in terms of, like, king and rightful king, it's like they could not be more different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, honestly, Stannis Baratheon is one of my favourite characters from this season. I love him. I think he's interesting. Good. I think he's so interesting. He's definitely good. Yeah, the only thing that really is a bit of a letdown for me is the fact that he doesn't get much screen time after episode 5 until Blackwater. He gets taken out of the story for quite a bit of it, which is a shame because I love his scenes. I love his scenes. But then again, having said that, the scene where he takes Renly's men and he says, hard truth cut both ways to Davos, that was a very good scene to sort of end off the first part of his storyline, because you didn't really need to do anything with him after that until Blackwater. But yeah, on top of all that, I think he's also got a very interesting backstory. The fact that in Robert's rebellion, he had to defend Storm's End because his brother was king. Or at least maybe it might have been the Greyjoy, but anyway. His brother was king, and he had to defend Storm's End, and him and his family nearly died. You know, they were starving, and Davos Seaworth saved them with, you know, the onions and the potatoes. Mm-hmm. And I like the fact that he did it because it was honourable, the fact that it was right that his brother was king and he commanded him to do it. And then afterwards, Robert gave the castle to Renly Baratheon, who didn't have to fight at all, but Stannis gave it up willingly because his brother was king. I like the sort of the sort of tragedy around Stannis Baratheon, the fact that he is a hero but he never gets recognised.
Yeah. He's like quite a he's like one of the like by the books kind of character in terms of like his loyalty, like he said, like he winningly gave it to Renly because Robert was king.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it very much feels like that he is being cheated by honor, like the honor of the fact that his brother was in power, and the fact that his brother doesn't care about him, very much shows that it feels like Stannis is being cheated out of what he deserves because he has done so much. He's essentially, his life has become miserable because he wants to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah, and it's just. Oh, it's so fascinating. I think for me, one of the reasons why he's one of my favourite characters in this season is because he just stands out. And that he is just so different to everyone else.
He is.
And I think he is also quite a misunderstood character too, because I know a lot of people just hate him instantly because he's quite a rough presence. And he also obviously does some very crazy things like, you know, killing his brother, like all that sort of thing. Trusting the Red Woman.
Mm. I guess.
But I think people just don't quite see the fine details of who his character is, and the fact that he's only doing this because he thinks he's following the rules, and he's following honor, he's doing what's right. And, you know, I think one of the details that people tend to gloss over is the fact of how much he regrets having to kill his brother for this. And even though he had no love for Renly Baratheon, you can very much see, like, what I did was wrong. I shouldn't have killed my brother if it was all going to be for a waste. And then, of course, you get that big moment of anger from him when he almost strangles Melisandre. You know, saying, where are your gods now?
That was intense.
Yeah. Oh, he's so interesting, Stannis. I could talk about him all day. He's such a complex character. But another great character that surrounds him throughout the whole season is Melisandre, aka the Red Woman, who's another character that very much stands out, is very different from the rest.
Oh yeah, she does for sure. She's like one of the most different characters in the show and this season.
Yeah, and her performance was very different from everyone else.
Yeah, it was so like, it had that obviously mysterious element to it, but she was like, had the aura of like persuasion and stuff like that. It's
so far in the show, she is the one that seems to have the most connection to magic and like the gods.
Yeah.
And I really like how there's so much uncertainty around her, like around if she's telling the truth, if she doesn't know what she's saying, if she's just a madman. Like it's very interesting. But one thing I really like about her is how much confidence she has because of what the gods tell, or what the Lord of Light tells her. Like when she says, like the episode before Renly Baratheon is killed, she says, "The night is dark and full of terrors," because she knows that he's about to be killed by her spirit thing, her shade. And like, it's interesting because you could argue she's quite an evil character in some ways. But then
she is.
At the same time,
ways, yeah.
She could also just be foolish. But I like the fact that everyone around her doesn't trust her, except for obviously the only ones that does. Obviously, Stannis needs her to win, so he's trying to use her magic to win the war. And then also Davos' son Mathos is very much in faith with her, with the Lord of Light. But everyone around her, people like Davos, like Maester Crescent, who gets killed in his first appearance, they don't trust her. And like you remember in the very first episode of season 2, Maester Crescent tries to kill her with poison, but then she drinks it and she survives.
Yeah. She's very mysterious in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I like the fact that her drinking the poison, it straight away establishes that she's a magical character.
Yeah, she very much is.
Yeah. And I think the most memorable scene with her in the whole season is when she gives birth to that shade. That was weird.
Yeah. That was extremely weird.
Yeah. But then, like, and I remember you were having, like, hesitations because you were like, I don't know what the hell that is, and I don't know, like, what purpose that's going to have in the story. And then immediately, as soon as episode 5 started, it all clicked.
Yeah.
Like, when Renly was killed, it was like, oh, that's what it was. And I love that scene in episode 10, how Stannis, like, almost kills her because he failed. And then she shows him the fire again, and then he sees himself he sees what he sees in the fire again.
Yeah.
And she's got him back on her side again. It's very interesting. She's a very seductive character in terms of her magic.
She is, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I think the actress, Carice Van Houten, she's actually, I believe she's Dutch. She brings something very different, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
And then we talked about, I think in one of the reviews, about how Stannis Baratheon is kind of one of those characters that has like an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other. Very much Melisandre being the devil on his shoulder. On the other side of that, you have Davos Seaworth, who is the Onion Knight, who is essentially his hand. He was going to be his hand if he won the battle. Again, he's another character that I really like, and I like how he is very much the point of view character in that storyline, because he's the one you can relate to.
I would agree.
Him being the smuggler. I love that detail of like him being the hero, him smuggling the onions and potatoes into Storm's End during the war, him doing that to save Stannis Baratheon's life, and the fact that Stannis was so grateful for it that he made him his sort of like one of his, he gave him a house name. Seaworth became an actual name. He became a lord. Well, not a lord, but he became a sir. And despite that, he had to cut off his fingers because what Davos did was dishonorable. Like, by law, it was dishonorable. He said to them, despite the fact that you have saved my life, my wife's life, and all of my men's lives by feeding us this food, what you have done is dishonorable to the law, so I have to punish you for it. I think that's such an interesting bit of backstory for Davos Seaworth.
I agree.
Yeah. And I love that actor, Liam Cunningham. Like, he's just, every scene he's in, he's very captivating. But I just really like how untrustworthy he is of the Red Woman, and how he convinces Stannis not to take her to King's Landing, because he basically says that if you take her to King's Landing, she could take the throne from you. And Stannis listens to him.
Mm-hmm.
But then, of course, you get that brilliant bit where he says hard truth cuts both ways to Davos. That was great.
That was good.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that, how Davos is that... He is the other side of the Red Woman. He is the more tactical side. And the more, like, thinking side, the more merciful side. Despite the fact that he is a smuggler, which is illegal. And I do really like that scene in episode 2 where he convinces Salladhor Saan to give his ships to Stannis. That was really cool. I like how Salladhor Saan's like, why don't I give my ships to Cersei? Like, very much saying like he wanted to marry Cersei. That was really funny.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And one of the other things that's quite intriguing about Davos is the fact that his son, Mathos, is more aligned to the Red Woman, and the fact that he feels that the Red Woman is taking his son away from him. And we talked about how they've got a very strange relationship with each other. And then, of course, his ship gets blown up with wildfire. And he's thrown into the sea. But yeah, I really do like Davos Seaworth. I think he was a really good character. Sometimes it's just the little things that count.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. It's definitely a show like this.
Yes. And yeah, Salladhor Saan only really appeared briefly for that part where Davos had to convince him about the ships. But I thought, again, Salladhor Saan, one of those very small characters that brings something completely different. I like how we're slowly drip-feeding more characters from Braavos. Like, because in the first season we only got Syria Farrell, but now we've also got Salladhor Saan and Jaqen H'ghar as well. So we're starting to slowly learn more and more about Braavos, and then eventually we're going to get a lot. Like, it's going to become a big part of the story eventually. But what I like about Braavos is the fact that all these different characters that we've seen so far from Braavos are so different. That they're all so different, but they all represent the same sort of free thinking, free city thing. Because Braavos is a free city.
I would agree.
Yeah. Shall we move on from Dragonstone?
Sure.
Alright. Now, another character that had a very interesting arc in this season was Robb.
Yeah. He had a very interesting season because he is... They said a lot during this season that he shocks people with how good he is in battle. But within his own camp, it's like he doesn't like the war because he wants to just help people, and is in a storyline with someone falling in love with someone, even though he made a promise at the end of last season. So he had a very interesting overall story this season.
I think one of the things that's really telling is the fact that at the end of the last season, after Ned died, him and his mother couldn't be closer, and then at the end of this season, they're quite far apart. That he kind of has a falling out with his mother over Jaime Lannister, and then that leads to him making a bad decision and marrying Talisa.
Yeah.
Which, as we've discussed in the reviews, is very different from the books, because in the books, obviously, he marries Jane Westerling, and the reason why he marries her is because he gets into a battle where he has a stab wound, and Jane Westerling is a nurse that looks after him, and then what happens in the books is, because he's a stupid young boy, her nursing him causes him to sleep with her, and then he chooses to marry her because he felt that it would be wrong to have another bastard boy, because he didn't want his child to end up like Jon Snow. So he ends up marrying Jane Westerling in the books for that reason. Here it's a bit different. Here it's more of like he just falls in love with Talisa, and it's slightly different to the Jane Westerling storyline, but at the end of the day, I feel like the bottom line is still the same, in the sense that he has broken the oath that he made to Walder Frey.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. it's interesting that they've gone and decided to change it, but I do think that in making Robb a more prominent character, because in the books he barely appears in it at all, I think in making a more prominent character, it was likely you would have to make some changes to it to make it make more sense to have more screen time. The only thing about it is that now that they've had to change parts of it, they've had to write in original story content for it. And whilst I think most of it lands, there's a couple of moments where I feel like it's a little bit off. And one of them was the very first scene, as we noted in the Garden of Bones review, about that very first scene with him and Talisa was very odd.
It was.
Yeah. But overall, I still think it was effective. It wasn't like, I wouldn't say it was like a brilliant storyline, but I still think it worked to, the marriage of him and Talisa still worked. And I think one of the reasons why, or actually two, there's firstly the fact that he's being distracted from this war and he's being distracted by this woman, but also the fact that because he has a falling out with Catelyn, it makes sense why he's not going to take her advice and he's going to rebel. Yeah, but that's basically my thoughts, I think.
Yeah, I don't have that much I would disagree on. I pretty much agree with it.
Yeah. The only other real details we got with him mainly was with Roose Bolton, and that was the fact that now that Theon has taken Winterfell, he's basically betrayed Robb, and Robb hates Theon now. And Roose basically says to him, well, I'll get my bastard son and my men to take Winterfell back for you. Because that was the brief sort of bit that we got with Roose Bolton. However, interestingly, the Boltons left Winterfell in a wreck.
Yes, they did.
And it's interesting. I feel like it's like, will Robb actually find out that that's what happened, or will he just assume that it was the Ironborn that did it? I don't know. It's hard to say. But it's an interesting detail that they did that, if you know what I mean. The fact that the Boltons did that to Winterfell.
They did.
You know?
Yeah.
It's a little bit suspicious, I would say.
It is.
But yeah, apart from that, Roose Bolton didn't get that much to do. I do think it was quite good that his introduction episode was the one where they were, they were cutting off legs of injured men. Because obviously the Bolton house, their sigil is the flayed man, and obviously Bolton wanted to, take some men to flay them, because that's what his house does, which is very sick and very messed up. But I think it was a good episode to introduce him in because it made sense, considering. And the other part of that storyline was Catelyn, who also went. She also travelled to Renly's camp early on as well, and she had a bit of a storyline with Brienne of Tarth. So what did you think of Catelyn in this season?
I thought she was great. I thought the actress was great, and I think the scenes between her and Robb were the most interesting, I would say, with her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she got a lot more to do than that, though, because she had scenes with Littlefinger, she had scenes with Renly Baratheon, she had scenes with Brienne of Tarth, and yeah, she got quite a bit to do.
She did.
She had that scene with Renly and Stannis when they met as well. That was very good.
That was very interesting.
I like the fact that we have established so far that Stannis follows the honor the same way that Ned does, yet Catelyn is so she has so much dislike towards Stannis. I think that's a very interesting detail.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think it really echoes the fact that what Catelyn disliked about Ned was that honor, because she disagreed with his decisions that he made around honor, and what she liked about him was the kind-heartedness that he had that makes him different from Stannis Baratheon. But yeah, I think one of the main things for Catelyn, obviously we talked about that scene with Littlefinger, that was very good when she got sent Ned's bones. That was a brilliant performance, I think.
I agree.
But I think the main storyline for Catelyn in this season was, obviously, Brienne of Tarth swore that oath to her following the death of Renly, and we get that whole storyline where it's between her and Jaime Lannister, which I think the scenes with Jaime Lannister, even though there isn't that many of them, I think all the scenes with Jaime in this season are very strong. In the very first episode, you get that one with Robb that I loved. You also get another scene with Catelyn in episode 7, the A Man Without Honor scene. That was great. And then I love the fact that, you know, Jaime Lannister kills Alton Lannister and he kills Torrhen Karstark. And that obviously leads Rickon Stark wanting to kill him because obviously Jaime killed his son. And then Catelyn lets him go anyway, which causes, you know, a lot of the Northmen to sort of turn against her, including Robb. And I thought that was a very interesting development in the sense that Catelyn is only letting Jaime go because she wants to get her daughters back, but all the other Northmen disagree with her, because Jaime is killing Northmen and he's also, you know, they're giving up their prized possession.
Yeah. It's a very complicated situation.
Yeah, the fact that she went behind her son's back to let Jaime go.
Yeah. Like, you understand why, it's just that it is just a very complicated thing between them, especially those two.
Yeah, and you got to imagine, like, if Catelyn wasn't the mother of the King in the North, Rickon Stark probably would have killed her then and there. But yeah, she's in a very interesting position now because now Robb has essentially arrested his mother. Anything else you want to say about Catelyn?
I just thought she was brilliant in pretty much every scene.
Yep. Then, of course, we got a very brief beginning of the storyline between Jaime Lannister and Brienne of Tarth, which I really liked. I think they have very good chemistry.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that they're such opposites as characters as well. The only thing they have in common is that they both fighters. They both sword fight. And also another thing that they have in common is that they are looked down upon because people believe that they killed their king. Jaime did kill his king. Brienne didn't, but the people believe that both did. So that's another thing they have in common. And they're also both blonde. But yeah, I do think they really have really good chemistry. I think Jaime's quite funny around her because he's making fun of her for being, the manly virgin woman. And I love that detail. Like Jaime just wants a fight.
Yeah, it's just so entertaining to see him just try and annoy the hell out of everybody.
Mm-hmm. One of the best scenes with Jaime in this season was the one where he was in the prison with Alton Lannister. I think Nikolai Coster-Waldau said in the trivia that it was one of his favourite scenes to film, if not his favourite. And I really liked that scene.
My favourite scene of him this season.
It was so good. Yeah, and also continuing on something that we got in season 1, I really liked the fact that he taunts these people, but then when he's left alone in a scene, he's very alone. He's not happy. He's quite scared. Anything else you want to say about Jaime or Brienne?
No, I think that's all I have. I think they're just, I liked what their stories were for this season. I look forward to seeing more next season.
Yep.
With them.
Alright then. Alright, so let's move on to Renly Baratheon.
Oh boy. I was pretty shocked what they did with him this season. Because how many episodes did he actually appear in?
Only 3. It was 3. Yeah, he appeared in What Does Dead Man Ever Die, Garden of Bones, and he died in The Ghost of Harrenhal.
Yeah, at the very beginning. So he practically only got like 2 episodes.
Yep.
Of like development, but it was interesting because of how that went into the Stannis story, how that developed that. But you're having this, so this is the best I've seen of a major subversion of expectations.
Well, I think the thing is you already knew about the fate of Viserys and Ned, so I think you kind of had that spoiled for you.
Yeah, true.
But this one for you had no idea it was coming. I mean, you didn't know that Robert. No. You didn't. I don't think you were quite surprised by Robert's death as well, but it was a bit of a different scenario.
It was
because it happened. It happened off screen.
Pretty much, yeah.
But yeah, I remember. I feel like that the Ghost of Harrenhal was one of those episodes that's going to be the best reaction, because it was just such a massive shock. But it
was right out of the gate.
Yeah, but it completely worked.
Oh yeah, it works.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I really liked how they followed up on where he was in season 1, how when he said to Ned Stark that, Stannis is no king, I am. And then obviously Ned denied him because he's not the rightful heir. And I liked how they used Renly Baratheon in this season to introduce the Tyrells into the fold, and also Brienne of Tarth. I really liked how they did that. And I think one of the best parts about Renly was seeing the fact that he was married to Marjorie Tyrell, but because he's gay, he couldn't consummate the marriage. And I think that was actually quite a funny moment.
It was very funny.
Yeah. But yeah, I thought Renly, for the very brief bit of screen time he got, I thought he was very strong. And his death was shocking. And yeah, it was just great. All the characters around him that got more development was very effective, you know. Of course, that leads us on to Marjorie Tyrell, who was introduced alongside him here in this season, who has very much been established as she is a lot like another Littlefinger Varys or, you know, Cersei Pycelle, one of those characters. And it's proven to you because at the very end of the season, she basically convinces Joffrey to marry her. So it's very... And what she says to Littlefinger before that, about 5 episodes before, is that she wants to be the queen, and now that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I like the way she uses her words to get power. It's very interesting. She's a very persuasive character.
Oh yeah, she is, for sure.
And I think the actress does a very good job. She's a very good actress.
The actress is really good.
Yeah, and I thought her scene with Littlefinger was great. That was very good.
Oh, yeah.
I
agree. I thought it was really good.
The best way to set yourself up as that kind of character is to have literally a scene with Littlefinger where you outsmart him. I think that really did a really good job of introducing her character by having her outsmart Littlefinger. That was quite something. But yeah, I think it's interesting how I like the fact that her being introduced into the fold also makes Loras Tyrell a more interesting character now, because rather than just being a soldier, he now has this sister who can control him, because obviously he wanted to go and kill all of Stannis' men because he was angry about Renly being killed, and now that Marjorie was there, she was able to control him and his anger. Yeah, very interesting. And now the Tyrells are in King's Landing, and that's going to make the whole story very interesting, because there's other Tyrell characters you still haven't got to yet, and they are another thing about the story that has just been slightly fed in this season, that they're going to become a big part of it from here on. So yeah, it's awesome. Mm-hmm. But again, like I said, I really like how they used the Renly storyline to introduce them into the fold. I mean, obviously Loras did appear in season 1 in 1 episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really like that. I also like the detail of Loras Tyrell losing that sword fight to Brienne of Tarth.
Yeah, that was very interesting.
Because it very much like it in season 1 when he beat the Mountain, he was very much there to impress Renly, whereas now he's being beaten by Renly, and there was a bit of friction between them. Well, one of the minor characters we got throughout this season that was darting between Robb and Cersei was Alton Lannister. Again, I like like we've said before, one of those very minor characters that has a big impact on the story, and he acted as like a human raven, and I really liked his death scene. I liked when Jaime killed him. That was very cool.
Oh yeah, that whole scene was great.
Okay, let's move on to another storyline that's one of my favorites, and that is the Harrenhal storyline. We have Arya Stark.
Yeah, her whole story was very interesting from start to finish.
Mm-hmm.
The interaction she's had with Tywin and the whole name-free
Jack and Hagar. Well, technically, it's a faceless man that wore Jack and Hagar's face.
Yeah. That whole story was so intriguing and so interesting and so well performed.
I love the Harrenhal section of season 2. It's one of my favorite parts of the whole season. I think it's a gem. It's brilliant.
I agree.
And not just that, I like the prelude to that with Yoren and them walking up the King's Road. That was also very strong as well. But when we get to Harrenhal with Tywin Lannister, it's just so good. every scene with Arya Stark and Tywin Lannister is gold. I think we mentioned in the Ghost of Harrenhal that the scene that they have together where she says anyone can be killed is possibly your favourite scene so far.
Yeah, I thought that was phenomenal and just fantastic stuff.
Yeah, from Maisie Williams as well.
Yeah, exactly. Both were brilliant.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I thought Arya was great. I love how she has all these people around her that are just teaching her all these different skills. One of them was Yoren, who obviously was the one that cut her hair, and I love the whole section where they're on the King's Road and the Lannister men are looking for her, or looking for Gendry mainly. And I love the way that he sort of like dismissed those men that were going to go and kill them, or find them, I mean. And there's that scene where he put the knife to the guy's leg, and then he said that the guy said, "We'll be back with more numbers," and then they actually did come back and they killed him. And they I love that whole section where they killed Lomi, and then Arya says that you just killed Gendry, but then you noted that it can't be a mistake that Lomi was blonde.
Mm-hmm.
That was very clever, I thought.
Oh, yeah.
I believe it was Polliver that killed Lomi. He only appeared in that episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really liked the scene where Yoren, a bit like, you know how we talked about how Roderick Cassel came into his own in his very last scene. I feel like Yoren was the same in the sense that he told that story about his that guy that killed his brother, and he would say his name before he went to bed every night, and then he found the guy and killed him. And I like how that led to Arya starting to say names of people she wants to kill before she sleeps.
Yeah.
That was really cool. I just like how all these characters are starting to have an influence on Arya.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Another thing is I also think she has very good chemistry with Gendry.
I'd agree.
And I like how he was one of the ones that knew, that could spot that she was a girl. It's interesting. It's just like Ned Stark's daughter and Robert Baratheon's son, just on the King's Road in the middle of nowhere. It's just interesting, and the fact that Tywin Lannister for a brief period of time had captured both of them, but he didn't know it.
That is funny.
And of course, Hot Pie was there as well.
Yes, he was.
I love the scene where he kept on talking so much bullshit, but I love the scene where he sees the mountain and he pisses his pants.
Yeah. That whole bit was pretty funny.
Yeah. Of course, that brought in the Tickler as well, and that was one of the most brutal parts of the season, was when the Tickler had the rat in the bucket, and he would set it on fire so the rat would dig out people's chests. That was brutal.
Yeah.
But then, of course, she got the Faceless Man to kill the Tickler. Another thing I also liked about the Harrenhal storyline was how it integrated the mountain, and the fact that this Harrenhal storyline connected to what happened in the Riverlands with the Brothers Without Banners. That's all been happening off screen. And this all began after he lost the joust with Loras Tyrell. Ned sent Beric Dondarrion to the Riverlands to sort him out, and we don't know what's happened now, but there's the Brothers Without Banners, and that's why they were torturing people. They're like, where are the Brothers Without Banners? Because they want to know information about them. The Mountain does. And I just like how this whole storyline that's happened off screen is connected to this one that we're seeing here.
Yeah. It makes it way more grounded,
And we get a bunch of very brief appearances like Littlefinger as well. He appears briefly in Harrenhal. That was brilliant. There's a bunch of small characters that appear, like Kevin Lannister. Obviously, he's just there to be the soldier. You've got Reginald Lannister and Amory Locke. One of them sent the letter to the wrong person, and the other one caught Arya with one of Tywin's letters, and then he had to be killed by Jack and Agar as well. Apart from those small side, there was Rorge as well. He was one of the people that was inside the prison, but he was a very one-note character. But apart from all those small little characters, the only other two we have to talk about are the major ones, and the first one is the Faceless Man, Jack and Agar. What did you think of him and his character?
I thought he was very interesting. I think he brought a level of mystique that was quite intriguing, and I think the performance was well suited for it. And I like how he was sort of like a weird mentor for Arya.
Well, I think it was cool that they got a German actor to make him feel a bit different.
Oh yeah, I'd probably say so. And I feel like that what's great about it, I think that you can tell that it's going to benefit Arya going forward for her character.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what's going to inspire her going forward. She's learned.
Yeah, and obviously in the final episode he gave her that coin and says, if you ever want to come and find me again, go to a Braavosi man and say Vala Morghulis. And then he pulled off his face and revealed a different one.
Yeah.
That was really cool.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah. And I liked the whole thing about the Faceless Men, about how Jaqen H'ghar was always dead, and this man was just wearing his face as a disguise.
Yeah.
And I think that ties in very well with the Harrenhal storyline, because obviously Gendry and Arya were there too, and no one was aware of who they were. And effectively, Arya was using, having short hair, pretending to be a boy as a disguise for people, so people wouldn't know who she was. And Gendry obviously has no idea who he is. He doesn't know that he's Robert's bastard. He just knows that he's Gendry. But I like how they used the Faceless Man in that storyline to sort of mirror that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, overall, I thought Jaqen H'ghar was very strong, and he was a great element to the Arya story for me. He's very cool, the way he assassinates people.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yes. And then, of course, I've left the best for last, and that is Tywin Lannister.
He was good. I think the actor was brilliant, especially with the scenes with Arya.
Charles Dance, man, he's bloody legend.
I like him. Yeah, I like how he did a lot of scenes talking about like his family, like the legacy and all that kind of stuff. Really showing off what kind of person he is to the core. I really like those scenes.
I love that weird father-daughter relationship he has with Arya Stark. That's so bizarre, but it's great.
Yeah, it's something I did not expect, but is really good.
Yep. And I love that detail of how he respects her more than his own men because she's intelligent.
Yeah, I liked. Because he likes Arya because she's smart, and he doesn't like people who are not like with a certain amount of like IQ. He values people who are like smart, who aren't
very
really,
street
really
smart,
stupid, like most of
very
us.
logical.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I think Tywin and Arya's storyline in this whole season, or Tywin and Arya's storyline, was one of my favourite aspects of this entire season. I thought it was really a hidden gem, and it was brilliant. I loved it.
I agree.
And
I agree.
And just the fact that he had all these meetings with these people, like the Mountain, like Littlefinger, like his men, and that whole Jaqen H'ghar storyline revolving around it as well was just brilliant. I just loved it. And I loved when he arrived at Harrenhal, he put everyone in their place. Like, he made Polliver look like an idiot. He's like, why are you wasting these people when they could be working? It was just very interesting to see him come in there and essentially, like, all these horrible people that have been doing what they've been doing to these, the Tickler, Polliver, the Mountain, and Tywin just comes in and completely just destroys them. It was very funny. But it makes sense, because Tywin is a tactical person. He's not a violent person if he has to be.
No. And
yeah, I mean, I've said before that, I think I've said before that Tywin's my favourite character in this show, and it's just like, we only got him in the last few episodes of the season, whereas this one we got quite a lot of him, and he's just brilliant. Everything about him, everything about his character to me is just amazing. The writing around him, the complexity of his character, the fact that he is the most powerful man in Westeros, but he has such a weird sort of redeemable sympathy to him. That hidden subtle detail of it was suggested that he killed his father to take his place. The way he feels about his children, the way he talks about how Jaime is dyslexic. He talks about, Cersei talks about Tyrion being the imp. He talks about Robb and how Tywin openly admits that Robb is such a great warrior. And then, of course, you get the brilliant end where he comes in at the end of Blackwater to save the day and takes all of Tyrion's thunder away from him, and then becomes Hand of the King to Joffrey.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just flawless. Tywin is flawless. Like, we've had all the way from season 1, episode 7, when he was first introduced, all the way up to what we've had so far. I can't think of one negative thing to say about him. He is, in my opinion, a perfect character.
I can't either.
Perfectly executed in terms of the writing, the direction around him, and also, of course, the actor, Charles Dance, who is one of my favourites. Perfect casting, just everything. And I also said in some of the reviews that I think Harrenhal had some of the best direction in the show, like some of the best camera work. It was just all great.
Yeah, I agree.
And some of those close-ups of Tywin, just powerful. And the fact that Arya came very close to killing him as well was very interesting.
Yeah.
Yes. But do you have anything else to say about the big father himself?
No, I just thought he's really good. Acting was great, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he does next season with King's Landing.
Yeah, now that he's the Hand.
Yeah. That's going to be interesting for sure.
So we don't have any other, like, human characters to talk about. The only things we have left are the direwolves, the dragons, and the White Walkers.
All of them really didn't have that much.
I think
presence.
the most interesting part was episode 2 when the White Walker was taking Craster's sons. That was the best of the 3.
And yeah, and that was pretty much it.
Because apart from, the direwolves barely appear at all. I think it's.
Yeah,
I know
get,
why.
like,
I do know
shots.
what. I do know why though. It's because season 1 they were just dogs because they were children direwolves. But at this point, you have to make them with CGI, and the CGI for the direwolves is apparently very difficult, which is why they don't appear in the show that much. Like, I honestly can't even remember the last time we saw Greywind, apart from episode 1 of season 1.
Yeah, and I think the only time we saw, I think the last time we've seen any of them was like, probably like just after midway with Ghost.
Well, no, we saw in the final episode we saw Shaggy Dog and Summer when they escaped Winterfell.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
Yeah. But Ghost left Jon halfway through. It was weird.
Yeah, that was really weird.
So yeah, Ghost has just gone beyond the wall on his own. The dragons, obviously, they played a big part in the Karth storyline. They were captured and they burned Pyat Pree.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, like we said, I think some of the writing for that storyline was a bit off.
It was. I would say so.
And then obviously the White Walkers. I think the Craster stuff was great, but then the final scene in episode 10 was a bit weird.
It was.
Yeah. And that's all we've got to say about the characters. That took ages. Holy crap.
That took
3 hours.
3 hours.
3 hours and all the characters. Whew. Alright, so now we can get on to the categories.
Yay.
So, for those who don't know, in the description should be some polls for you to vote in for what your favourites and least favourites are for all these different categories. Usually for these kind of things we read out what the results were for the previous season's polls, but unfortunately at the time of recording the season 1 recap has not been uploaded yet. So hopefully when we do the season 3 recap I can read out the results of both season 1 and 2. That would be great. But we'll have to wait and see for that. But yeah, go vote in the description for what your favourite and least favourites are for all of these categories. So, the first category we have is the standout character. I have about 4, and I haven't decided which one of the 4 that is my favourite. I'm not sure.
I have mine.
Who is yours?
Mine's Theon Greyjoy.
And why is it Theon Greyjoy?
Because he was fucking great in terms of acting, and his story was probably my favourite from the season. I think I enjoy extreme conflicted characters that make sense. Like, I thought his story was phenomenally told, and the acting across the board for his story was brilliant. And yeah, I was shocked at how invested in his story I was.
It was great.
Like, his stuff was probably the best written stuff I would say this season. I don't know if that's actually even controversial at all. Not saying that's bad, because I think people will agree that this is great, but I was really invested in the story.
Well, he is one of my 4 options.
Yeah.
The other three I have are Stannis Baratheon, Tyrion Lannister, and Tywin Lannister. For me, those were the 4 standout characters in the season. And oh god, it's difficult.
The reason why I wouldn't go for like Tyrion is because I feel like that his best is yet to come.
That is a good point. He was very much more in the background.
I think the story is not like in a bad way, but it is holding him back until we get to his very best. I think it's naturally progressing to that.
That is a good point.
That probably will come in King's
I
Landing.
just really enjoyed that whole Harrenhal storyline, but it was technically a background storyline, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I and as much as I have a bias towards that character, I think I can knock him off for this season. But he did come very close, just because I think Tywin for me is just such a brilliant character in anything he's in. So I'll knock him off. That leaves Tyrion, Theon, and Stannis. Oh god, it's difficult for me. They're all very close. I don't know. I can't think of like anything negative to say about any of those 3 characters. For me, they're just so brilliant. Like Tyrion and Stannis for me are the integral part of the main story. They are the 2 characters that are the most prominent in the main storyline, the War of the Five Kings. And then of course Theon Greyjoy was very much a separate storyline, but it was such a brilliant self-contained one. Oh god. Shit. Okay. I think if I'm going to have to nail it down, because, like I mentioned, Stannis' storyline lacked screen time in the second half, I'm going to knock Stannis off. But it's not done easily, because I think Stannis is honestly a contender. I think he was brilliant. However, it is possible you can make the argument that because he wasn't in Season 1, he doesn't quite have as much build-up. But he was amazing. So that leaves Tyrion and Theon Greyjoy. Jesus Christ. God, see, the thing is, I feel like Tyrion was the standout in the first half, but Theon was the standout in the second half. I'm going to go for Tyrion Lannister. Because I feel like he just... His storyline in this for me was just so interesting, seeing him as Hand of the King and in power. All the dynamics he has with every character he's with Joffrey, with Cersei, Jenna Slint, Varys, Littlefinger, Pycelle, Bronn, Sandor Clegane. And I think for me... Shay as well. That's a great part of it. But I think for me, what really cements him at the top for me is Blackwater. I feel like his entire storyline leading up to Blackwater, and then the fact that he was the one that led them all into battle to win, but then to be completely fucked over and robbed by his own father, and then be in the lowest place possible afterwards. The fact that his whole face was sliced. The fact that he's now not Hand of the King. He's not sleeping in the same bed. He's just kicked to the side, despite the fact that he was so heroic. For me, is just something that really connected, and I think Peter Dinklage's acting in this whole season was phenomenal from start to finish, especially in the first half. It was. I think honestly, it just some of those scenes just for me were just they were just so good. I mean, Theon, man, he comes really close, but if I had to pick between the two, I'm going to choose Tyrion Lannister, and I think it's possibly just because I want to provide a different option. I don't want to go for the same character, because Theon again, like, that's another character that had so much brilliant stuff to do. I think maybe one of the reasons why I might slightly choose Tyrion also is because I think the characters that surround Tyrion are more interesting than the characters that surround Theon, if that makes sense. Just gives them a slight advantage for me, but they are both extraordinary. So yeah, interesting, because last season you chose Tyrion and I chose Ned, and now this time I'm choosing Tyrion, and then you're choosing Theon.
Yes.
Alright, standout location. We have King's Landing, Winterfell, Dragonstone, Harrenhal, Karth, Pike, and Beyond the Wall.
I think mine was King's Landing, because I think this season, I think the production value was so much better than last season that I really felt the vibe of the city, and also the battle in Blackwater.
Oh yeah,
was so
that's
good.
a good point. Yeah, Blackwater was brilliant.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the location of King's Landing this season. I felt like they really improved on it from last season with the production.
Yeah, it was great. Mine isn't King's Landing. Going through all the other options, I'm not going to choose Winterfell either, because that very much remained the same. With Dragonstone is a very cool place, but they don't really show us most of it. I think budgetary reasons might be the reason. We never really see it during the daytime, aside from that scene on the beach, but they don't ever properly show us the full scale of Dragonstone. It's very much hidden. So the other four for me are all very great. I love the vibe and the look of Karth. It's very cool. However, they didn't show us enough of it. I feel like when they opened the gates and they showed us the city, it was like, wow, that looks great, and then we never really saw it. Which leaves the other three, which is really hard to choose from. I think Pike, the Iron Islands, is really cool, like how it's those three different big stone things with the bridges between them. That's awesome vibe. I like that. But that's not going to be my choice. Because for me, the best looking location, or the best location in general for me, is between Harrenhal and Beyond the Wall. Harrenhal is this sort of just this graveyard of a castle. I loved all the direction, and I thought it was one of the ones that actually lived up to what it was meant to look like. Just the whole bleakness of it, looked black ash. It was just great, and there was no roofs, and the rain shots are brilliant, and just the whole aesthetic of Harrenhal was great. But then we've also got Beyond the Wall, where they went out on location and actually filmed in the real snow, and it looked great. It looked so big, and it's because it was actually real. So for me, it's between those two. And I'm going to go with Harrenhal, and the reason why is because I think, whilst I loved the location shots Beyond the Wall, I think the Crestus Keep stuff maybe wasn't quite as much of a spectacle as that was. So it was mainly just in the second half where I really liked the stuff Beyond the Wall and the way it looked. Whereas Harrenhal, every scene at Harrenhal looked amazing. It was awesome. So I'm going to go for Harrenhal for my standout location.
Alright.
Now, standout side character. So these are characters that are not a Stark, Lannister, Baratheon, Targaryen, or a bastard from those families. And in this season, I'm going to count Theon as also a main character, so you can't choose him either.
Damn.
Yeah. I have a lot of options for this one that I could choose, and I'm not really sure which one I'm going to go for. Do you have one?
Yes.
And who was yours?
I went for Varys this season.
Yeah.
I thought he was great.
Yep.
I really enjoyed him in every scene he was in. He pretty much was the role that Littlefinger was last season. So I feel it was natural like he would be my favourite side character from this season.
Yeah, that's true. So the options that I've written down: Sandor Clegane, Peter Baelish, Varys, Maester Lewin, Jorah Mormont, Samwell Tarly, Ygritte, Melisandre, Davos Seaworth, Brienne of Tarth, and Marjorie Tyrell. Now let's go through this. I'm going to knock off a few of these. I'm going to knock off Brienne of Tarth because she didn't get as much screen time. I'm going to knock off Jorah Mormont because the Karth storyline wasn't as strong. I'm also going to knock off Peter Baelish because, again, like we said, he didn't get as much to do as he did last time. I think I'm going to knock off Samwell Tarly. As much as I like him, again, he didn't have as much to do as some of the others. He wasn't as important. Same for Marjorie Tyrell. As brilliant as she was, she didn't get as much screen time, so she wasn't as prominent. I'm also probably going to knock off Sandor Clegane because his storyline didn't really properly click into place until we got to Blackwater. So it was very much a build-up to his point of brilliance. So I'm going to get rid of him. Which leaves 5. We have Varys, Maester Lewin, Ygritte, Melisandre, and Davos Seaworth. As much as I love Ygritte, again, she didn't appear until the second half, so she didn't get as much screen time, unlike the others, sorry. So I'll get rid of her. As much as I love him, I'm going to knock off Davos Seaworth, because I feel like Melisandre was slightly ahead of him this season. Ooh, hard choice, but I'll probably knock off Maester Lewin as well. Which leaves Varys and the Red Woman. I thought they were both very integral to the season. They did a lot. But like you, I think I'm going to go with Varys. Which is interesting because last season we chose Peter Baelish, and we said that Varys was a very close second. So it's interesting how the tide turned, how now Varys has taken that role as the standout side character. I think it's good to see that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And going into season 3, you're now going to wonder, well, who's going to get the upper hand now that they've both, they've both matched each other, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Now it's going to be back at even point again, where Littlefinger and Varys are going to be competing to see who can make the right moves next.
Yeah.
But yeah, Varys was brilliant, wasn't he? He was absolutely brilliant.
He was fantastic.
Yep. Okay, now we have the standout music track. What was yours?
Mine was Winterfell.
Ah, yes, the updated version of the Stark theme.
I thought that track was beautiful. I love that track. I think the inherent sadness that comes with that, I think is really powerful.
It was like a more tragic version of Goodbye Brother.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really, really good.
Yep. That was one of the best as well. There was a lot of tracks I loved this season. The Throne Is Mine was one of them. That one gave me goosebumps on the reaction. That was brilliant. We also had Warrior of Light, which was the theme of Stannis and Melisandre. I loved that one. That was great. We also had 2 themes for Theon Greyjoy. One was What Is Dead May Never Die, and we also had Pay the Iron Price as well. One thing I love about I think it was Pay the Iron Price maybe, was that it played a little bit of the Stark theme first, but then the Greyjoy theme took over. Mm-hmm. I thought that was really cool. That was very close to being there. As critical as we were of the Karth storyline, I thought the Karth theme was quite cool.
Yeah, I think it's good.
Obviously, the Reigns of Castamere is a big part of the show, being the Lannister song, but I feel like its purpose wasn't quite prominent here, as much as I love that song. We also had I Am Hers, She Is Mine. I thought that was very strong for Rob and Talisa. I thought that was a very, very strong track. We also had some great music in Blackwater. However, the one that I have gone for is the one that I said in the review that we did was my favourite of the season, and that is Valar Morghulis. And that is the theme of Arya and Jaqen H'ghar. There's just something magic about that theme for me. I don't know what it is, but it's just so good. Like the way it sounds, it's completely different from everything else, but I feel like it perfectly fits the Faceless Men. It's so bizarre, it's so different. I love the little acoustic parts, but then you've also got the stranger parts as well. It's just a brilliant song to listen to. Yeah, great, love it. Love Valar Morghulis. Yeah, that's my pick. So now we move on to the standout worst thing from the season. And like we do with all the recaps, I have given a list of not just what we say, but I tend to give a list of what a lot of people say. So I tend to go through all of the general complaints people have about a season, not necessarily that they're my own, but it's to give you guys as an audience, when you're voting, to give a list of options of what you think is the weakest of the season. So these are all the things that I feel like people complained the most about season 2. So we have changes from the book is the big one, first one. We also have lack of season 1 characters, so people like Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon are no longer there.
Well, they're dead.
Yes, they are. Slow pace. Not living up to the scale of the book, so things like the Battle of Blackwater and Dragonstone. Missing characters from the book, so people like Patchface, people like Jane Westerling. There's all sorts of characters that they cut. Major characters from season 1 getting less screen times, people like Littlefinger, people like Jaime, all those sorts of things. Renly Baratheon's quick death was one that people criticised. Jane Westerling being changed to Talisa Maiga. The tonal shifts, so when you think about... there's that scene at the start of Garden of Bones with the farting Lannister man. That was very weird. The Karth storyline as a whole. Changing the White Walkers from being the others to being these sort of zombie things. And then, of course, the worst sin of them all, and that is the Slitheen being killed.
I might... if I was going for meme answers, then I would have picked that.
Yep. But no. What would you say is your choice?
Yeah, the Karth storyline being extremely underdeveloped.
I agree.
I think that's a it's massive oversight. That was.
Mm-hmm. Yep. By far the weakest for me. I mean, there's a couple of things in here and there that weren't too... Like, there was a couple of nitpicks, like the scene at the start of Garden of Bones with, like, the farting Lannister man and then the weird dialogue with Rob and Talisa. But that doesn't fail the story. It's just a little bit off in execution, whereas I feel like the Karth storyline really does kind of fail in some aspects.
Yeah.
And it really did stand out as weaker than everything else. Apart from a couple of scenes, there were a couple of good scenes in the Karth storyline, like the staircase scene. That was good.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I agree with you on that. Standout thumbnail, we can't say yet because none of the thumbnails have been made, so go vote in the poll for that. Okay, so last time we did this for season 1, am I right in saying that you went first?
Yes.
Okay, so does that mean I have to go first this time round?
I guess so.
Alright, so the way this works, if any of you don't know, we rank the episodes from 10 to 1. For example, I name my number 10, then Callum reads his 10, then I read my 9, and so forth. And if we have the same episode at the same level, we snap and talk about it together. And this ranking allows us to give our final thoughts on all the episodes and where we place them, and just sort of give a brief... if we've got any thoughts that we didn't quite get off our chest, and just sort of an overall feeling and describing why we feel the way we do, and just to give an overall ranking of the episodes, because that's always fun. So, are we ready to begin?
Yes.
So, my number 10 is The Nightlands.
Snap.
Yes. So, not a bad episode by any stretch. I thought it was very solid. There was next to no flaws that I have with it. The only thing is, this was a very mild episode, and it had a lot of building up.
It was.
The only major thing we got from this episode was the storyline at Craster's Keep with the White Walker taking the baby.
Yeah.
Because apart from that, it was quite a mild episode, and it was just there to set up things to come. But I liked it. I liked it. It was very similar it was quite similar to Lord Snow from season 1.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think?
Yeah, I pretty much agree. I think it's, out of all the episodes, it's definitely the most uneventful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what it does well. Just I think it's not that exciting.
Mm-hmm.
In comparison to everything else.
There are other episodes that have more flaws, though. It's just this one ends up at the bottom because the positives are quite mild. It's a very consistently decent episode rather than a great one with a few flaws.
Yeah, this is probably the lowest bar I would probably say the show should be, and it's still pretty good.
Yeah, we gave it an 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like this is the lowest bar the show should be, because this is an effective filler episode.
From what we've seen so far, because if this was probably just another random show, then I'd be like, this is probably one of the better episodes of that show.
Yeah.
But because every episode in this show so far is really good, this is the lowest.
Yes. I agree with you. I agree that this is the point where it's it's acceptable to have an episode this low because it works in terms of the clockwork of the story. But it ends up at the bottom because it's quite mild in comparison. Alright, so you snapped, so does that mean I have to read out my number 9?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay. This one might be a bit of a hot take. My number 9 is Vela Morghulis.
Ooh.
The finale.
Ooh, that's really interesting, actually.
Mm-hmm. And the reason why is... So, I like it. I like the follow-up to Blackwater. I like all the stuff that it does to end off the season and begin the new one. However, most of the scenes in this are very small. They are very small scenes, very compact, that only move each storyline a little bit forward. And they were good. A lot of them were really good. But most of them didn't have that much depth to them, I felt. There was a couple of them that really did. I thought the Stannis Baratheon scene was brilliant. But, for me, the reason why this episode ranks so low is because of what happens in Karth with the House of the Undying and the Zara Zoe Doxos end scene. I feel that element of this finale was quite disappointing. Not only because they didn't adapt from the source material what actually happened, but what they replaced it with was not well executed. And I feel that because that part of the finale takes up such a lot of the screen time, that lets it down quite a bit for me. Because the House of the Undying could have been something way better than what it was, and the final section with Zaro's death and Dorea's death was just weird. And it was quite a disappointing ending for me. It felt flat. But having said that, everything else in the episode was solid, but it was very much just a small set of scenes to move the story forward. Very much like the Nightlands, actually, but possibly a bit more interesting. But yeah, I've put the finale this low, mainly for the Karth stuff. So, what is your number 9?
My number 9 is A Man Without Honor. And the reason why it's probably this low is because of, like with you with Vela Morghulis, it's with the Karth storyline. The reveal of, like, Pirate Pri being like, oh, I've captured your dragons, Daenerys, and then we're going to kill all the 13. But we don't know what that really amounts to is really underwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we knocked it down in our rating of it when we did the review. Overall, I thought the episode was good. I just think that really knocked it down for me in terms of quality.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the reason why my number 8 is A Man Without Honor.
Ooh,
because like you, the Karth storyline again let that one down. However, the reason why I've put it slightly above the finale is because this episode, for me, the positives of this are slightly higher than the finale, and the main reason why is the storyline with Jon and Ygritte, I think, is really strong in A Man Without Honor. And also the stuff with Jaime Lannister as well is brilliant. I love the stuff with Jaime Lannister in that episode.
Mm-hmm.
But apart from that, my feelings on it are very similar to the finale in that the Karth storyline lets it down massively, and the rest of it is just very solid.
Yeah.
So, what is your number 8?
My number 8 is The Prince of Winterfell, and I think what this episode was a very good setup for the last 2 episodes, or at the very least, it was a good setup for Blackwater.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's, again, kind of like Nightlands. It is very much just like a transitional episode. It feels very mild in comparison with everything else.
Well, I mean, episode 8 of season 1 was a bit like that too, with the pointy end.
Yeah, I think that's a good comparison of that. But I think the scenes between Jon and I can't remember pronounce that name. Ygritte, yeah. I enjoyed those scenes that they had together.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in the other episodes as well that we'll get into. And the whole Catelyn releasing Jaime was an interesting aspect of the story that I liked, and the confrontation or the conflict between her and Rob was interesting as well. Yeah, stuff like that I really enjoyed. But yeah, as an episode, it feels very transitional to get to that next episode, which is massive.
Yes. I will add on top of that, I agree pretty much the same, because my number 7 is the Prince of Winterfell. And I will also add on top of that, this does not have the big flaws of the Karth storyline, because the only scene we get in Karth is the one with Dany and Jorah, and that scene's fine. But the focus is elsewhere, and one scene that I'll add on top of that you haven't mentioned is the one with Stannis Baratheon and Davos, when he tells the story about Storm's End. And for me, that story and that bit of lore in the show is such a massive part of Stannis' character that I love. So I think that for me elevates it slightly as well, but also the fact that it doesn't have the flaws of the other two I put below it. But like you said, it's very much a transitional episode, but one that's a bit more interesting than the Nightlands. But yeah, I feel very similar to you. That's why I've put the Prince of Winterfell at number 7. So, what's your number 7?
My number 7 is Garden of Bones.
Ooh!
And I think it's weird because all these episodes, I think from here on out, are quite on a similar level. Because I think with all the ratings we did, they're very similar in terms of how we rank them.
Oh yeah, Season 2 is very consistent, aside from the Karth storyline.
The things I loved about Gardens of Bones were the scenes between Catelyn and Littlefinger, because I think those were some of the scenes. There are very few scenes throughout the season I got very emotional at, and that was one of them. I really, really liked that scene. I thought that was really good. Also, you had the stuff with Joffrey abusing 2 whores in that episode, which was just very uncomfortable to watch. And then you had the introduction of Karth in that episode, which I think had a decent introduction, but then it just never went to anything from that point. And then you had the fucking weird ass cliffhanger, which really just weirded me out, and I was just, that was the most, I think that's probably the biggest reaction I've had to this show so far.
Aside from what happened directly after that in the next episode.
Exactly. They're connected pretty much, in terms of my reaction to the show so far.
And that really gets you invested in the magic of the Red Woman.
Yeah, that scene was just so weird as well. It was just so weird. Yeah,
I'm gonna take a guess and say the reason why you've ranked it lower is because of the first section at Rob's storyline.
Yeah, because I think that opening scene is quite weird. That first sort of 7 minutes it's a bit rough. It is quite rough, I would say, to watch and sort of listen to the dialogue.
But also the farting as well.
Yeah, that was just really weird. The stock sound effect. It was that's with a show like this, that's you can't really ignore.
See, when we're watching Aliens of London World War 3, it's not as bad because it fits the Slitheen, whereas with Game of Thrones it's a bit I don't know about that.
I think it fits the tone.
Yeah,
it fits the tone. Yeah, I think Garden of Bones is a very good episode. I just think it has individual scenes I liked. As an overall package, it's probably, in comparison with everything else, just slightly below.
Alright then. Well, does that mean it's my time for my number 6?
Yes.
My number 6 is What Is Dead May Never Die.
Ooh, okay.
Episode 3. So, in this episode, we have Theon Greyjoy, a lot of his stuff at the Iron Islands that I really liked. That seems to be the main focus of this episode, and I think that's its strong point. And I will also say this is one of those episodes that doesn't really have many problems with it. I really like it. This is also the episode where Tyrion does the scene with Littlefinger, Varys, and Pycelle, and that was also a great part of the season. I loved that part. That was brilliant. And then we get, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is the episode where Yoren dies. So this is the one where they find Arya and Gendry, and they're about to take them to Harrenhal, and this is the one where Lomy dies. And it's a great cliffhanger to end on. And this is also the one that introduces Marjorie Tyrell, and brings in Renly Baratheon into the fold, into the show, and it introduces Brienne of Tarth as well. So it does a lot of introducing like the Nightlands does, except it does it, I think, the stuff that it does here is a bit more interesting than the stuff it does there. And also, following off the Nightlands, I love the detail of like Beyond the Wall with Craster's Keep and Jorah Mormont knowing about the White Walkers was very, very good. And overall, it was just a very solid episode, and I really liked it. What's your number 6?
My number 6 is The North Remembers.
Oh, yes.
I think it's a very good introduction to the season. I think it has a lot of good scenes. I think right off the bat, the production values, you notice straight away how much they've improved. That first scene is just like, the colour grading is so colourful, and the camera work is great. Just how it looks is beautiful. And yeah, I think what it does really well is just a good amount of setup. Also, it introduces people like Stannis Baratheon properly.
Yes.
And obviously that storyline. And then you had scenes like between Littlefinger and Cersei, which were very intense but very intriguing to watch. Yeah. And then you had that, oh god, that very uncomfortable, like disturbing section at the end where they were killing all of Robert's bastards, which was hard to watch. But yeah, but as episode 1 to a season, it's very good and very solid.
Yeah. I'm very much the same, because my number 5 is The North Remembers. I really liked it. I thought outside of Blackwater, this had the biggest scale of any episode. It had a lot of landscape shots, and I thought the direction was just phenomenal. And like you said, it was a very good episode. And this episode very much cemented Joffrey as the king, and like who he is, and him becoming a man. And I just really liked it. I really liked the whole thing and the way it set up Stannis Baratheon and just a whole bunch of things. And just great episode for the same reason you stated. It's not higher because it doesn't have. There's the episodes I've ranked above it for me have slightly more interesting storylines. So yeah, that's why North Remembers is my number 5. So what is your number? Is it your number 5 now?
Yes.
What is your number 5?
My number 5 is What Is Dead May Never Die.
Ah, yes.
And I think what puts this just above North Remembers is the scenes with Theon. I think those are brilliant. The scene on the beach is very good, but the scenes with his father and sister are very, very interesting to get like a perspective of like how he's treated as a person within the family, and sort of like the continuation of his insecurity. And obviously you had that scene with him burning a letter with that amazing shot of him in the dark. Oh, that was just very good. You also had like scenes with like Cersei and Tyrion that were really starting to boil over. Obviously like scenes with Marjorie were just like quite entertaining as well.
Yeah. But like we said, that was the episode where Tyrion there was that whole scene where Tyrion was asking questions to Littlefinger, Varys, and Pycelle, and it was cutting between them.
Yeah. In terms of entertainment, it was great.
Yeah.
And I think it was a really, really, really good episode.
Yeah, it was. Okay. My number 4 is The Old Gods and the New. The best part of this episode was Theon Greyjoy. This episode for him was everything. He was brilliant in it. That whole scene where he beheaded Roderick Cassel was one of the best scenes of the whole season. It was amazing. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And that, for me, is one of the highlights and why it's ranked so high. But, having said that, I'm just going to remind myself, there wasn't really anything about it that I necessarily disliked, because the Karth storyline, the only thing we got in that was Daenerys' dragons being captured. But that wasn't a problem until the next episode, and in that episode we got the staircase scene, which was the best part of Karth. That was great. And yeah, overall I just thought it was a very solid, very consistent episode, and the highlight for me was the Theon scene. That was just so brilliant. I loved that. Loved that scene. It was great. What is your number 4?
My number 4 was The Ghost of Harrenhal.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, I thought this episode was really good, and it started out with an absolute bang. with the death of Renly Baratheon. That was the most shocked I've been in the show. Like, I was taken aback by it. It was really intense. That the whole thing was. And obviously, you had like the scenes between Davos and like Stannis, which were brilliant in terms of dialogue.
Yep.
Yeah, and all that was just fantastic. Also, there's some nice little like scenery stuff in Karth I liked in terms of set design.
Yeah, that was one when they went to the markets.
Yeah.
The bazaar.
Yeah, I like that. I liked that kind of stuff. And obviously, then you had the scenes between Arya and Tywin.
Yep.
And that really was like the highlight of the episode, along with Renly's death for me. That whole scene in terms of just acting was just another level. Yeah. And then you had like the cliffhanger at the end with like Arya naming someone and them dying, like I think it was the Tickler. That was a nice little bit I liked. Just sort of just
that was a great cliffhanger with Jack and Agar. That was great.
Yeah, I thought it was really good. And then obviously it was the discovery of wildfire as well, that episode.
Yeah.
Which was obviously foreshadowing what would happen in Blackwater. But yeah, I think The Ghost of Harrenhal was a very good episode. I thought it was really good. One of my favourites in terms of acting.
Yep. Now, before I move on to my number 3, I just wanted to add on another thing I forgot to mention about episode The Old Gods and the New. That was also the episode where Jon met Ygritte, and that was a great part of the storyline as well. I really liked that. Okay, my number 3 is Garden of Bones.
Ooh.
Yeah, now this episode we noted was the most violent and crazy there was so far.
Yeah,
and
it was.
I would say outside of the first 7 minutes, because we noted that was a weakness, I would say outside of that, like once we got past that point, it was just banger after banger of a scene for the rest of the episode. It was brilliant. I loved the rest of the episode. It was filled to the brim, but it didn't feel forced. Everything was on fire. Even the Karth storyline was great in that one. It was just phenomenal. I loved it. If it wasn't for that first 7 minutes, it might be like even higher on the list. I loved this episode. It was so good, and that whole thing at the and in hindsight, the fact that I know where the Red Woman storyline was going, just seeing again like the scene where she gave birth to that shade was just great. I loved that whole thing, and just the absolute psychopathy of Stannis Baratheon and how he knew what was about to happen. It was great. I loved it. Garden of Bones is a brilliant episode. It's also the one where Tywin reappears, and he's brilliant as well. And yeah, overall, I thought it was extremely strong, and the only thing that let it down slightly was the first 7 minutes, but apart from that, it was phenomenal. That's why it's my number 3. What's your number 3?
My number 3 is Vala Morghulis.
Yes, now, we have these quite different on our lists.
Yeah, I was shocked at how low yours was in comparison to where mine was. So I think the reason why I liked it a lot was because I think in terms of like how it finishes off a lot of the storylines that I really liked, I think it did it in a very good way. The only real criticism I have of it is the ending of the Karth storyline.
Yep.
Everything else I thought was so satisfying to watch and brilliant. The scenes with Theon were probably some of my favourites. I think his acting again was phenomenal, and the speech he gave was like a really good speech as well.
Maester Lewin's death too.
I think that got me really emotional. I actually was like really emotional and like torn from that, because I actually have grown to really like his character. And
which is a nice surprise, isn't it? It's a nice surprise.
It really was. And I think scenes like between Tyrion and Varys I really enjoyed, especially like post Blackwater with Tyrion, how like his whole like story has come crashing down from like his power, and now he's nothing really. I really enjoyed those.
And also the scene with Stannis Baratheon too.
Oh yeah, I thought that was really, really good.
I killed
And I
my own
did-
brother.
And while I had issues with like the Daenerys side of the story, I did like the scene with her in the Red Keep. I actually really liked how that was done, the shots in there, and like the set design. I really liked that. I thought it was neat. But yeah, other than that, I think I really enjoyed it as a finale. Saying much like what last season's finale was, setting up the next season.
Yep.
And
As we-
closing out stories I loved.
As we noted in the review, it's the only episode I've given a lower score than you so far.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that shows within the rankings of like proof of that.
Yeah. All right. My number 2 is The Ghost of Harrenhal. Oh my word. This episode has aged like fine wine. Oh my word. So, right off the bat, Renly Baratheon is killed. Just, that whole first section was so good. It was so fucking brilliant. Hard truths cut both ways to Davos. That, and I mentioned, I think I sent out a tweet actually, about the thematic mirroring between Stannis and Daenerys in that episode, and just how much that satisfies me in the fact that they use both their storylines, the fact that both people are completely different, yet they have so many similarities, and it causes them to be at a crossroads where they're both at the same point. And the fact that they used the direction to showcase them both at that same point was artistic mastery. Then you had the Harrenhal storyline, where you get the scene with Arya and Tywin Lannister, and that whole scene was just some of the best of the show. It was phenomenal. Then you have the fact that you have Jack and Agar killing the Tekla. That was a brilliant part of the story. And also, you know, in that episode we got Jon meeting Corin Harfan. That was a nice little detail. I really like at this point where Jon was coming into his own. This is when Tyrion finds the wildfire. It's just, The Ghost of Harrenhal is just top to bottom a great episode. I love it. I'm just trying to think of anything else I haven't mentioned. Obviously, the stuff in Karth too. I really like the stuff in Karth with the market, and yeah, that was really interesting. It was before the Karth storyline started to slip, because I think it was the next episode after that it started to slip. A lot of it was focused on the Renly's death storyline with Stannis, and the Harrenhal storyline. It was just the whole thing, and obviously we get the beautiful scene where Brienne has to swear. Well, she swears an oath to Catelyn Stark as well. I loved that scene. That was great. And yeah, overall it was just fantastic. It was so good. And also, I believe that was also the episode where Bran sees the vision of Winterfell's walls being flooded with the sea, and then Roderick drowning, which I thought was a great bit of foreshadowing.
Yeah.
And overall, I also think in terms of direction, it was one of the best directed episodes. It looked brilliant. I loved the way it looked. It was slick. It was so slick. But yeah, I think mainly the reason why I love this episode is what it did for Stannis Baratheon's character and what it did for Arya and Tywin. That was just some of my favourite stuff in the whole show we've ever had. What's your number 2?
My number 2 is The Old Gods and the New.
I think I know why.
Yeah, that opening scene is phenomenal. Theon Greyjoy, that is the scene where he becomes one of my favourite characters in the show. From acting, from the scene being so emotionally charged, how the scene's structured, the rain, how that like really gives off that vibe of like the dread and like the coldness of that entire scene. Roderick, it like goes out like an absolute badass, really like haunting Theon in his final words. And Bran's actually pretty good in that scene as well in terms of like acting. But yeah, also the stuff with like Jon and Ygritte was great. I actually thought that was really entertaining. And I loved the staircase scene between Daenerys and the Spice King.
Yeah.
I really liked that scene. I think that's a really good scene. Yeah. I thought that episode overall, I really, really loved it. But the reason why it's so high is because of that opening scene.
Theon Greyjoy.
Yeah, Theon Greyjoy is great.
Yeah. Which means that just like season 1, our favourite episode is the same, which is Blackwater.
Blackwater.
What a masterpiece. What a battle. Focusing entirely on King's Landing, Stannis versus Joffrey. It was phenomenal from start to finish.
Yeah, I think because they've held back in not being able to show a battle so far, there was a lot of build-up and anticipation for the show to show its first fully fledged battle, and it did not disappoint. I loved the way that the fight was structured, how it was directed, and the action and choreography itself was great.
Absolutely.
Then you got Tyrion's speech, which was great.
Yep. Brilliant moments for characters like the Hound, like Stannis Baratheon, like Sansa, Cersei, obviously Tywin Lannister coming at the end. The direction was awesome, and I stated in the review it's very much a realistic portrayal of war, which is unlike anything you get in Hollywood. It's just phenomenal. I love it. I absolutely love it. It's one of my favourite battles in terms of story that I've ever seen. Because there's other battles that have a bigger budget and more choreography into it and more, interesting sword fighting and whatnot. But this one, in terms of a story, I really liked. I thought it was so well told. And quite fitting that written by the man who did the books himself, George R. R. Martin. It was just great. I loved it. Everything about it. And it has such a massive implication on all the storylines going forward as well.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I just love the way that they showed all these points of view of all these different characters who were affected by the same war. That was amazing. Absolutely amazing. So, that is our ranking of the episodes. Obviously in the description here, there's a poll for you guys to vote for what your favourite is. I've got a funny feeling that Blackwater might get the majority of the votes.
Just might.
Mm-hmm. In terms of the story arc of Season 2, what were your thoughts?
I thought this overall story, and all the story arcs, generally were really good.
Mm-hmm. The War of the
With a
Five Kings is
couple-
what you would call it.
Yeah. I think overall, it was very good. I think it was a natural progression from Season 1, and I think overall, it was very good. There were a lot of good highlights. Couple of issues here and there, but overall, I really enjoyed it as an overall story for this season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much. In a lot of ways, it's weird because it's the War of the Five Kings, which seems to be the epicenter of the entire story. And in some ways it is, but in terms of the characters, this is very much a transitional story from Season 1 to 3, or from Book 1 to 3. And that I think that's very interesting. The way that George R. R. Martin uses the War of the Five Kings as a big plot point, but then for the characters it's quite transitional. But it is the best kind of transitional you can get, I feel. At least for most of the storylines.
Yeah, I'd agree.
It was great. Alright then, so give your conclusion and rating out of 10 for Season 2 of Game of Thrones.
I think Season 2 is very good. I think its overall story is very satisfying with a lot of good characters and some phenomenal acting. It makes characters that you wouldn't really think much of some of your favourites in the show. Think the King's Landing, Stannis Baratheon story is fantastic and well built up. But then you've got stuff like the Calf storyline that feels so underdeveloped and overlooked. It's really a big problem and feels so inconsequential to the show. I think Season 1 was definitely way more of its highs were higher, and I think Season 2's lowest were much lower than Season 1, so I would probably say that Season 1 overall is better than Season 2, But season 2 is still very good. Like, it's really, really good. I would probably give season 2 an 8.5 out of 10. I think because the lower episodes are just okay in comparison with the highs. So I think giving an 8.5 is probably what I'd probably give it. And I think that's... yeah, I think that's what I'll give it.
Alright then, yeah, I'm very much on the same wavelength. I think this one has actually aged well for me because when I first watched season 2, I didn't really care about it that much. But the more I rewatch it, the more I like it. And this time around, I think was one of my better viewings of season 2. However, the only thing that hasn't aged well is the Karth storyline because I feel like that is definitely the weak point of this season. And yeah, that definitely does hold it down a little bit. However, apart from that, I think it's very strong. With the War of the Five Kings, obviously Theon Greyjoy storyline was brilliant. Tyrion Lannister as Hand of the King was amazing. Obviously with Joffrey's development, and you've got the storyline with Stannis Baratheon and Renly Baratheon, and that was fantastic. Jon Snow Beyond the Wall was great as well. So for the most part, it is a very, very strong season. I just think that maybe the Karth storyline lets it down a little bit, but it is still very strong overall, and I'm going to give it an 8.9 out of 10.
Alright.
Yeah. It's an interesting one, but I still think despite the fact that it's not quite as consistent as Season 1, it's still very, very strong. So, what would you like to see from Season 3?
Well, I think the battle between Stannis and King's Landing / Joffrey is on hold for now. I'm not sure. I guess I would like to see more Beyond the Wall. I'd like to actually see Daenerys' story actually move forward now and actually really pick up ground. And I think the next big thing will probably be the war between the North and the South. I guess. I think that will be the big thing next season, probably. I think that would be the natural progression.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I can tell you is, so in terms of the books, A Game of Thrones was adapted into Season 1, and then A Clash of Kings was mostly adapted into Season 2. But as these book series go on, like they usually do with these kind of things, especially when you got one with world building, the books tend to get longer. So, A Storm of Swords is a much bigger book than the previous two. And so what they did was they adapted the entire thing into 2 seasons. So the next book spans across seasons 3 and 4. So the storyline is going to be very fleshed out from here.
Cool.
So yeah, you got that to look forward to. But yeah, I'm very much looking forward to getting to season 3. It should be interesting. And the next episode we'll be watching will be episode 1, which is called Valar Dohaeris. So yeah, yes. I'm very interested to revisit this one. Actually, I'm very interested to see how I feel because it's been a while since I've watched it. So I'm very interested to see how I feel about season 3 now that when we rewatch it. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see how it turns out. So, have you got anything else to say for this video?
No, I think we've gone over everything.
Almost 4 hours.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay then, well, thanks for watching, and we will see you all next time for Valar Dohaeris.